Okay, we are live on YouTube.
Good morning and welcome to the August 2nd, 2022 public hearing and public meeting of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. We'll begin by taking attendance, and I will turn it over to our General Counsel, Mark Silverman, to call the roll.
Chair Carroll.
Here.
Vice Chair Bland.
Here.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Here.
Commissioner Chapin. Commissioner Chapin. Commissioner. Thank you. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum. Commissioner Gustafson.
Here.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Here.
Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Holford Smith.
All right. Good morning again and welcome again to the August 2nd public hearing and public meeting of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. This meeting is being held via Zoom and live streamed on our YouTube channel. We will begin this morning with our public hearing agenda, which will include applications for work on designated properties. And then we will have a public meeting agenda, which will have items that have already had a public hearing and are back today with revisions in response to hearing the commissioner's comments, which were made after hearing the presentation and the public testimony. And if you would like to testify on any of the public hearing items, you may do so by going to the Zoom link at the estimated time that is shown on the agenda for that item. And that agenda can be found on our website. We will also have a screen up at the time we take testimony for each item. And if you would like to just watch the proceedings, you may do so on our YouTube channel. So I will now turn it over to Caroline Kane-Levy, our Deputy Director of Preservation, to take us through our public hearing agenda.
Thank you, Sarah. The first item on our public hearing agenda is item number 1, docket number 22-10519, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the borough of Brooklyn, 357 Clermont Avenue, also known as 325 to 361 Clermont Avenue and 91 to 99 Green Avenue, an Elizabethan revival style school building with Gothic detailing designed by J. Frederick Cook and built in 1931. And the application is to alter a courtyard and bleachers, install a ramp, and install lighting fixtures.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Andy, if you can just click on your screen, you'll have control of the presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
You still haven't clicked on your screen yet? Perfect. You can advance the slides using your arrow keys. Please state your name for the record and you may begin.
My name is Michael Doyle of Atchison Doyle Partners. And my associate is Andy Liu, who was also involved in the design of this project. This is a part of the historic district in the Fort Greene Historic District, and is bounded, as was stated, by Greene, Vanderbilt, Lafayette, and Clermont. Clermont became the default main entry to the building, as opposed to what we're going to be presenting over the years for security purposes, and none of the building is really accessible, and that started to present a problem. And from a security point of view, the one entrance was through a fire stair. You'd either go down or up to the offices. So let's continue. Just to put it in context of the boundaries of Lafayette, Clermont, Vanderbilt, and Greene, there's a large playing field to the back, large open space, which is a big part of the neighborhood. Next. And this shows it's in the company of some pretty strong neighbors. The Bishop Loughlin High School, Claremont Avenue, is on the upper portion, and you can see that was originally the main entrance to the building. And then when the field was closed off and the entry was put onto Clermont to the right, it just fell into being used as access to the athletic fields. The just before COVID, we finished about a 4-year program of all the facades. There were like 9 different facades were restored under LPC guidance and great expense to the school, but it was done and it's being maintained. And in fact, it looks even better than this in real life. Next. And I did ask Andy to go into this portion.
So we're going to go through a few of the existing condition photos. The first photo that we're currently looking at is the area of the existing concrete bleachers, one of which we are proposing to remove to install an accessible entry to this courtyard and subsequently to the main entrance of the school and reactivate that space. Again, as Mick stated earlier, we just finished a previous extensive rehabilitation program for the school on the facades. So what we're looking to do now is provide access and entry into space, as well as security lighting at the entrances to the doors on either side, as well as the main entry. A few more existing condition locations, just give context to where our existing lampposts are on each side, which is flanking the sidewalk that is being done under a different that's been approved under a separate application, as well as looking at the out to Clermont Avenue, and this is out to Vanderbilt. A close-up photo of the existing decorative poles. We are confident that these used to be lampposts at some point in time, as they are hollow and they or have crosses on them currently, but there has been some historic photographs of ceremonies that show posts at the top, so that we're coming back to reuse, salvage, and reinstall a post fixture at top. A few more photos on the right. You're looking from the public right of way into this concrete bleacher area, and from on the left, we're looking toward from the upper courtyard that it is basically the access to the field and the area that we're proposing.
So this is the Clermont Avenue entrance, which will be the main access to the school building. Those gates will be open.
So just going to give you a context in the overall context of the ramp and bleacher, what our intervention is here. We're proposing a very minimal section of the concrete bleachers that are being used by the faculty and the staff to be removed, and carefully integrating a switchback ramp within the parameters of the bleachers.
Next, yeah.
So what this will do is we will provide due to the grades, we'll provide a three-part ramp that will switch back twice. That would fit within the existing dimensions of the bleachers, so it feel proportionally correct, as well as provide some planting to make the ramp.
Yep, and it will be less visible, but we also found detailed drawings in the boiler room, as typical in a school like this, of the structure of the ramp. And if this can be really cleanly done, that the cutting out of the old bleachers will be right at one of the joints of the column, so it won't be just a massive, it'll be a more surgical removal. And then the slope of the ramp, in fact, will echo the slope of the existing bleachers, which are being repaired and restored all the way across with the concrete. It's in pretty good condition, actually, but there's a whole structure underneath the bleachers.
So this is just a quick detail blow up. We have as I iterated previously, a 3-part ramp. We have some planting on the sides to minimize the visual impact of the ramp, as well as providing a pretty standard railing detail for the ramp itself.
And as an aside, the president of the school has an active plan with the landscaping that's on that upper level, which you really can just see greenery from the street. And they have an arborist and a landscape firm that takes care of it. They don't just, and he happens to be very interested in the plantings, and this is not going to just be a scattered move, but will be maintained as the main entry.
So just to give you a context, we prepared a few renderings for you to give you a visual of what we are anticipating the ramp to be like. So kind of an aerial view, this gives us, we can see the wall sconces that we're proposing, as well as lampposts that we're refurbishing and providing a post top on. This is again a very minimal intervention here, and then a bird's eye view of the space, so it's contained to that portion which is really focused on that Clermont Avenue, which is the main entrance for the students. We're going to go through two views, both from the Clermont. You've come into the field from that entrance. You would see, this is what you would see as discussed previously. We would have an arborist carefully curate the planting to make sure that it's not haphazardly done. And we would have a ramp that goes up, as well as a stair that comes up, takes us up to one of the three entrances, which will be accessible into the main building. Again, another view, you've come in and this is your ramp that comes up, follows the person up, and it takes us to the courtyard level.
And just a side note, the contractor we're hiring for this concrete work is the one who did the really great concrete work at Mount Zion on 145th and Combin Avenue, which the other day, just as a total aside, at the Conservancy open house, a number of people, I love it when a visitor drills down to a nerdy question like, who did that concrete work? Because it's important, and we feel that this has got to be done really right because of the rest of the building. Didn't scrimp in stone, and pretty nice masonry detailing.
A few views from the public right away. This is from Clermont Avenue across the street, looking at the proposed ramp. As you can tell, you can't really see it with the planting. It's very buffered.
Next.
Again, another view from the proposed right away. This is looking at the street. Again, it's a very buffered ramp, but you would mostly be focused on the field condition itself. And then for the lampposts, so the existing lampposts that we're proposing and salvaging, we had measured, they are in good condition. They are about 6'4" high, and we're proposing a proportionally correct lamppost fixture that would sit on top of these posts, which is about 1'9" by 10 inches. And as part of this, we would propose putting a very similar, a matching fixture, wall sconce, for the posts that would be flanking the entrances at 3 locations. And
we did go to the community board. They were unanimous in the ramp and the layout. We had a healthy conversation about the light fixtures. We're talking about Central Park light fixtures. We worked very closely with the staff on this right from the beginning. So we were never that far away, but the Central Park style fixtures they don't come in a smaller size, and we're just overwhelming for the existing post proportions. So we're asking for this, but I know the one question the community board had was, we look at another lamp. I just wanted to wrap up this portion and just say the school has over 600 students. It's a very successful school. 98% of the kids go on to college. It's been around for quite a while. On a personal note, my father went there, and the school subsumed Bishop McDonald High School into the school, and my mother went there. So I'm happy to see this happen and the school continue doing well. We can answer any questions, Caroline and
Thank you.
Carol.
Thank you. Okay, commissioners, do we have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson, please go
Yes,
ahead.
just two questions. You said this was a minimal solution. So I have two questions. One has to do with the ramp and the planting. And page 16 and 17, why do you have to cover the ramp with planting? Why the planting to cover the ramp? That's question one. Question two, is there too many lights? The number of poles are quite, could the number of poles be reduced? Or do you need that technically to light the bleachers?
Well, I can answer the first one about the landscaping. We were just trying to make it a more attractive entrance. And frankly, Commissioner Jefferson, that the next move, if money ever came available, would try to create a better gate than the that's there, so that it feels more like a significant entrance. Right now, it's the chain link. In terms of the lamps, they're pretty much in the position where they originally were found.
Oh,
But we could be, if it was we don't need, technically, we certainly don't need that many lights, especially since the lights on the building would be taking care of a lot of that.
well, thank you very much. Thank you.
But the poles are there and it's the tops that you're adding, right?
Yes, here, so let me just flip to the last slide here. So sorry. Okay. So basically from the top here to the bottom here, that's the entire pole that we're salvaging, and then we're just introducing the light fixture, just adding some wire to.
And they're cast iron, and we're talking about adding two.
Yeah.
At the top of the bleachers, which were going to be replicated from the existing ones.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions? All right, I don't see any other questions at this moment, so we'll move to public testimony. And if you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And I will turn it over to Sonia Gior to take us through the testimony.
Thank you. So we do not have any signups in advance for this item, and I don't see any hands raised. So I'll note that Brooklyn Community Board 2 recommends approval, noting that it also reviewed letters from the local historic associations, including the Society for Clinton Hill, Fort Greene Association, and Citizens for Responsible Neighborhood Planning of Clinton Hill and Fort Greene. And those all uniformly recommended the application, with the exception of the style and proportion of the proposed lamp heads and sconces. And the community board noted that the applicant has agreed to replace with type B pedestrian poles from the NYC DOT street design manual. And I'll turn it back to you, Chair Carroll.
All right, thank you. All right, do you want to, I know you talked a little bit about the community board's discussion on the lamp posts, and I'm not sure if the pole from the manual is something different than the Central Park fixture that you were discussing.
So the fixture, the Central Park fixture, we looked extensively at the proportions of their ramp, the light fixture itself. The fixture itself is an acorn type fixture, and it's typically on posts that are about 12 feet tall as you walk around Prospect Park and Central Park. Proportionately, it does not fit into salvaging an existing pole. We did speak to a manufacturer in regards to manufacturing custom acorn to fit on top of this pole. The ones that provide for Prospect Park as well as Riverside and Central Park. And due to manufacturing constraints, they noted that they were unable to manufacture, just dimensionally scale it down for an acorn to fit a pole of this proportion. So we did explore putting the existing post on it, the existing type B fixture on top of that post, as well as talking to a manufacturer to potentially custom manufacture a piece, and both of those options were not viable for the existing pole.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, if there are no other questions, commissioners, I'm going to start sending you requests to unmute so we can close the hearing and begin our discussion. All right, and Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. So this athletic field is an area that has changed a lot over time, and there's this line of modern bleachers, and the proposal is to remove a portion of the concrete bleachers to allow for this ADA ramp, which would be also in concrete in a harmonious color and with some plantings integrated into it, and then to install new light fixtures on the top of existing salvaged poles and two flanking the entrance that would match. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner, so it's the ramp and the light fixtures. Commissioner Jefferson, would you like to start this one?
Sure. When I saw that, I thought it was an elegant solution. Well done. And I thought, gee, the formal arrangement of this is so powerful. Why do you need the planting? Because the planting, as I see it, is to soften the edge of the ramp. And the ramp is beautiful as it is. So that was my question, the reason for my question. But I think it's a very well done project. And I can live with the planting. I just think it takes away from the formal power. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson?
I'm willing to bet that this building was not designated for the concrete bleacher seating, which is to say the ramp, I think, is actually more attractive than the original seating. So I agree with Commissioner Jefferson. I think it's fine as is. I actually love the array of lighting coming across the front of the building. I think it's terrific. So I'm okay with it just as it is.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baran?
I'm in agreement. I think every aspect of the proposal is appropriate.
Commissioner Chapin?
Yes, I agree with other commissioners that it is completely appropriate.
Commissioner Goldblum?
Agreed. It's appropriate.
Commissioner Devonshire?
Appropriate.
Commissioner Chen?
Same here.
Okay, and Commissioner Bland?
Yes, appropriate, all of it.
Okay, all right, so I think we have a consensus to support, and I do think that, I do understand the comment about the planting in relation to the formality of the design, but I think planting can also work within a play area or a field area, so I think could be okay as well. Commissioner Jefferson, are you comfortable making a motion to approve?
Sure.
Okay, great.
In the matter of LPC 22-10519-357 Clermont Avenue, aka 322-361 Clermont Avenue, 91-99 Green Avenue, 318-364 Vanderbilt Avenue, Fort Greene Historic District. Application is to alter a courtyard and bleachers, install a ramp, and install lighting fixtures. I note that the building style, scale, and material and details are among the features that contribute to the specific architectural and historical character of the Fort Greene Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the work will allow for barrier-free access for the school terrace courtyard entrance in a non-obtrusive manner, that the work will occur within a section of the athletic field which has been significantly changed over time, and therefore the removal of the concrete bleachers will not disrupt the significant architectural features. That the ramp will be constructed of poured in place concrete with black metal railing, and the simple design and material will harmonize with the other features of the site. That the planted landscape elements will help conceal areas of the ramp cheaply and will tie in with the green space of the high school entrance courtyard, that the retrofitting and in situ reuse of the 8 historic cast iron posts as lamp posts will preserve these significant architectural features, and that any modification necessary to raise their height to a serviceable level and install lantern will be done carefully without causing irreversible damage to the historic post. That the new wall mounted light fixture will match the new lanterns, resulting in a harmonious design, and that the proposed work will not detract from the special character of the school building or the historic district.
Thank you very much. And Commissioner Gustafson, would you second that motion?
Second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
With 9 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, that's approved. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much, commissioners and staff.
Take care. And we'll now move to the next item.
Item number 2 is docket number 22-07520. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, 1 Willow Place, also known as 54 Geralman Street in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District, Block 260, Lot 23. A Greek Revival style house built in 1849. The application is to construct a stair bulkhead and install other rooftop elements, alter the parapet, modify and create window openings, and legalize the installation of a porch without Landmarks Preservation Commission permits.
Hey, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. David, you now have control of the presentation. You just need to click on your screen, unmute yourself, and state your name for the record. Also, please note your presentation, I was experiencing a lag, so you may experience that as well. So be aware of that. Please do unmute yourself, state your name for the record, click on your screen, and you may begin.
Hi, good morning. My name is David Mansfield. I'm not sure can you see my video?
No, we cannot.
For some reason, I'm not able to see that. So apologies. Oh, here we go. It was closed. Good morning. I have to share my screen. I'm sorry. This is my first time presenting via Zoom.
Oh no, David, you need to
Here.
click on your screen. Just click on it.
Okay,
Right now you have control of the presentation. There you go.
perfect. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Sorry for that. I'm going to go back. So basically, sorry, this is the lag you're talking about. Our first screen here is basically showing where we are. We're at the corner of Geralman Street and 1 Willow Place, which is in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. Subject property is called 1 Willow Place. It's a Greek Revival townhouse from 1849, I believe. And as Caroline just told us, we're planning 3 basic distinct items. Excuse me. One is new windows opening, the other stair bulkhead. And the last thing is to legalize the existing porch, which you see on the long facade, which is facing Willow Place. I'm going to jump to some historic photographs. I'm going to click on that. On the top left here, we have the. Excuse me about that. I did not do anything. Okay. Technical. Gotta watch. So basically, hopefully we stay here. 1940 Willow Place, you can see that the building is relatively as is, with the exception of the porch. The fenestration that was added or was modified and the side elevation has changed somewhat since that, and I can show you in a minute. 1980 is a little bit unclear, but you can tell that the porch is not there. These photos are from, I think, the IRT, which is around about 1906. The building here, he showed that the fire escape is in place. Anyway, we're not talking about that. So it does intonate that it was a multifamily home for some time. This elevation shows us removing the fire escape on the north elevation, which is predominantly the only thing we're doing on the actual facade. But you will also see that we're adding a guardrail and a bulkhead for the rooftop roof deck. The next elevation is the west elevation, which is more substantive in the amount of work. This sort of composite demolition elevation gives us an indication of the proposed work that we're going to show in the next elevation. The windows are relatively haphazard. The entrance is, not standard to be on the long facade of the house, but obviously there are instances of that we can discuss. But basically, we wanted to reformalize this entrance, make it a little bit more balanced and symmetrical, reinstate on the second floor the window heights to where they were more originally, and add corner windows at the edge of the corner between Geraldman Street and Willow Place. Here is you can see here that we're removing part of the parapet and chimneys, which are obsolete. This is the now composite facade showing here with X's where the previous windows were. Basically, again, enlarging these windows, removing a window here, relocating it over here, and then adding these corner windows, trying to formally organize this facade. In addition to that, our major parti is to level the parapet and to raise the parapet a small amount at the center to align with where the guardrail would be at the roof deck. The line here shows the line of the roof beyond, and as you can imagine, we're building up the roof deck to be level. So that's the sort of the general design idea. This dashed line here showing the existing roof parapet line. So you can see that it's level over here, and it's slightly above where it is currently. Again, in the distance, the bulkhead. In addition, here there's a new fence at the rear yard, which is a segue to the rear elevation, which is non-primary, but because this is end of row, because our rear yard faces Willow Place, this non-primary facade is visible from the public thoroughfare, and we'll show you that in some photos and images. Again, the back of the house, we're proposing to enlarge these two windows and remove the masonry between them and install a larger unit facing the rear yard, which is not atypical for brownstone renovation on a non-primary facade. Replace the existing door and existing opening, and of course we're also proposing to change all the windows throughout the house to more historically appropriate 6/6 full brick-to-brick restoration windows. In addition, we would add a new brownstone lintel above this new opening to match the existing brownstone lintels at the rest of the house. We worked with Brooklyn Heights Historic Association. We've come up with a couple of different options, but this is one we've settled upon on the rear facade. So to the images, we have here again sort of an axonometric showing existing conditions proposed. This will be a little bit, this is a little bit a clearer way to indicate the bulkhead, a low 40-inch high skylight bulkhead, and what will be a mechanical enclosure, which would actually be semi-opaque, like a slatted enclosure for HVAC equipment. And also the railing here, and here you see the parapet. The sections tell a story that the bulkhead, when viewed across the street, is not visible across. This is across Willow Place, which is the short section, and across Clermont Street. It's also not visible, but as you'll see in our photographic viewpoints, this can be viewed because of the change in elevation on the streets in this area. Here's some views of our bulkhead mock-up. This is actually the mechanical enclosure. This is viewed from Willow Place, as you can see here, looking towards Clermont Street. Subject property is in red, and we have two views here, sort of existing view from distance and then zoomed in. The next view corridor is viewed from lower down near the BQE, which is down towards the park, looking up Clermont Street. And again, in these instances, we've sort of highlighted, obviously in the day glow orange, the bulkhead. That's like the actual bulkhead rooftop stair. Here, this is a zoomed in version of that, just for clarity's sake. This is also viewed further up the street, so you can see. This is perhaps a little bit confusing if anyone's been by to see it. We're trying to show the parapet and the bulkhead, and they sometimes blend together a little bit because they're both in orange. But this is the bulkhead beyond here. This is the line of the parapet, and it drops down over here. See, and then we go to the view from Clermont Street, which is again like the change in elevation, because this is heavily sloped. We see in this photograph the orange of the mock-up. This is again like a zoomed version of that. This is a view further down the street, from not across the street, but close to across the street. And you can see here also the zoom version. Here's a photo composite, which might be more helpful. This is the bulkhead in mock-up form. Excuse me. This is the proposed elevation. You can see here we've changed out the windows, taken off the fire escape, and the exterior of the bulkhead will be a sort of a dark gray metal, similar to a zinc color in sheet metal steel, in standing seam, so it'll blend generally with the sky. Again, here's some photo composites showing the existing house with the mock-ups, and then also the new reorganized facade, the corner windows. Hopefully your resolution is a little bit better than mine, but we put a person up on the roof deck with this open steel rail. So running through it, this is a view of the rear facade, which is essentially remove the fire escape and enlarge this opening. So it's window openings we're asking for approval of. And we are also putting in a new fence here, which is aligned with the property line of the property. It's 6 foot high. It's we have a detail of that. It's basically a wood painted fence with narrow open slats, vertical. So essentially it's a privacy fence, but it's not completely opaque. Here we have also, just for information, the existing conditions of the rear yard and proposed conditions of the rear yard, which this shows our fence. Again, we're not really asking for permission on this, but I think it's helpful to understand that this will provide privacy for the new opening at the back. Here we have existing conditions at the roof. skylight bulkhead, pretty much it. And here we show our mock-ups, photographs of the new stair bulkhead and the new railing. And this is mechanical enclosure. This is a view from the front of the roof near Droleman Street, showing the setback of the new railing off the front of the house. These are floor plans that I'm going to run through because I'm not sure they're important, other than the fact that it's going to be a single family house and we're not enlarging it in any way other than the bulkhead. We put together some context photographs for a couple of the things we're looking at. One is the corner windows. We had looked at this as examples in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. Obviously, these are Willow and Cranberry, Willow and Middag, Henry and State. These are, again, vertical lines of corner windows that match the general fenestration pattern also here at the corner of Willow and Pierpont. In addition, because we had talked to Brooklyn Heights Association about the appropriateness of two things. One, the parapet line, the removal of the chimneys, and the work we're proposing to basically level off the roof line and also project the parapet up to create a sort of a centralized symmetry to the side facade and the entrance facade. So here are some examples of, houses. This is a house on Droleman Street facing Henry. It has the entrance on the side, on the long side, and the roof line is not expressed. In other words, it's level. This is also the same house here. This was LPC approved in 2013. Here is an example of like a T-porch, which is a highly glazed, open, design that overlooks the public thoroughfare. So we think that this is a good reference. Here's a similar fence. In addition, we have 2 Sydney Place, which is again a narrow facade facing one street, and the entrance is not there. And on the side elevation facing Droleman Street, there's a very elaborate entrance, although it's not centered. And also there is a raised parapet portion on this. So there is precedent also on 15 Willow Street, central entrance on the long side with the entrance. This one's up steps, but the entrance is on the side centered on the facade, and there is an expression of the roof through that. That's our presentation.
Right, thank you.
Sure.
And we'll see if we have any questions. Commissioners, yes, Commissioner Bland, please go ahead.
Sorry, I was muted.
Okay.
Wondering if the bulkhead is absolutely code minimum height at this point in your design.
The bulkhead is the minimum height for the door and the inside, the 7 feet clear inside. So we've kept the roof framing as small as we were allowed to. We can, yeah.
And could it be reoriented to a redesign to reduce its visibility from Droleman Street?
I mean, obviously everything's possible. We came up with this because obviously we're keeping it as close to the property line, on the long property line. It works obviously better because if we turned the stair towards the back, towards the sort of this, I guess that's the south, as opposed to the north, it would it would force us to put the mechanical equipment at the front, and the mechanical equipment at the front is actually not the best view, obviously. Yeah, so we're trying to tuck everything tight against the property line, the mechanical equipment, the skylight, and the bulkhead. I think if we got pushback in the bulkhead, we would try and you know, redesign the bulkhead in some manner. If that was the, we felt that because it wasn't visible across the street, obviously it's visible from higher up on the street, but it may be hard to like keep everything invisible on the top of this roof because the elevation changes. So yes, so basically we could do that, but then we'd be putting the mechanical equipment at the front, which granted would be lower.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, my question is about on the Willow Street side, the what I'll call the parlor window. In the line of windows along the side, toward Clermont, you have, it appears that second floor window is larger, I guess, sort of echoing that you've got larger windows above the door, obviously, as would be typical in some situations. But in most of the examples you were showing, there were, it would be completely symmetrical with windows on the other side of the door, which in this case, you don't have space to really, it's not exactly symmetrical, obviously, building. So this is more like a line of windows. So my question is, why have that window be a different size if it's just, in effect, a line of windows along the edge, as opposed to one on each side balancing, so to speak, if I'm clear.
I'm not sure 100%. I think you're asking, we have the centralized window composition above the entry, and then closer to the corner we have 4 windows which are pretty much their own thing. They're not balanced on the other side. We don't have 4 windows on the other side of the house. Is that the question?
Yeah, but the second floor window appears in everything I looked at to be, and maybe, it's somewhat larger than the other windows. So the question is, why not have it be the same size if it's just, since there's no opportunity to have a symmetrical arrangement where you've got the parlor floor flanked by 2 larger windows on each side. Am I wrong that window is bigger?
No, you're right. And I believe that we matched it with the front, at least is our intention, that it was matched with the front facade with the Clermont Street facade. I'm not able to control the.
Yes, Mr. Mansfield, you can just click on the screen and go back.
Okay, I'm sorry. I did try clicking, it didn't work.
I thought that's what you were doing, that you were kind of.
Yeah, our absolute intention is to take what's on Clermont Street and turn the corner with that.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely matching. And then we draw the line across Willow Place, so that, the first thing we saw when we saw this building was, this is, a fantastic location. The windows are kind of a mess, as you can see.
Yeah.
And it's
Mr. Mansfield, can I interrupt for a minute? I think it would be helpful for the public to see the drawings or elevations that you're discussing. So if you could go back to the page as you speak, I think that would be helpful.
Thank you. It's not.
Would you like me to do it for you, David?
Yeah, can you do that? Because I'm clicking on it and it's not moving.
Sure. Yeah, which drawing number are you looking for?
I'll go forward, like to the start. And I think
that had occurred to me, so I understand what you're doing now, at least, which is wrapping around taking the language of Geralman around to corner to Willow.
Yeah. The drawing number is 104. Yeah. Sorry. And then 103. I'm sorry, 102. My apologies. So that was. And if it's not the case for some reason, yeah, so it's 6'8" on.
Yep.
So we continue that around.
Okay, but the width is the same. It's just the height is taller to reflect the parlor condition on
Yeah.
Geralman. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. I thought that might be the case, but I wanted to understand if that was your reasoning in creating that larger window. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson, please go ahead. You just have to remember to say okay to unmute.
Did you talk about the issue of the porch? The installation of the porch at all?
I don't, probably not enough. So the porch was, the porch pre-exists our owners purchasing the property, and we're actually surprised to find out that it actually had not been approved. And it seems, based on the age of Brooklyn Heights Historic District and the fact that it's not showing up in the 1980 tax photograph, that it was added while the area was a historic district. So we're asking for it to be legalized. There are either pre-designated or during designation additions, which are sometimes tolerated. And this is obviously one of these ones that we were surprised that we found out that it wasn't. And I think that the Brooklyn Heights Association is okay with this. Because it was one of our points was to really get their opinion on this. They're okay with it's there. Their problem was that potentially that it's a sort of a Greek revival porch, and maybe if I can zoom, if I can control this, or maybe Carolyn, you can go to some of the existing photographs, which would be at the start of the presentation. Maybe the next sheet. The porch is a carbon copy of two porches which are across the street. I don't know if you can zoom in on that at all, but the two houses across the street, which are, I believe, 2 and 6 Willow Place, are sort of a Gothic revival. Sorry, 2 and 4 Willow Place, and they're the same time period, but they have this Davisian window pattern, and they're sort of unusual for the area. So the new porch is actually a carbon copy of that. And while it's not appropriate because our house is Greek revival, Brooklyn Heights Association are okay with the fact that or can tolerate the fact that it's something that was installed and adds, I don't want to speak for them, but it adds a porch to the facade, and which can be done on a Greek revival townhouse. It may not be detailed in the exact way that's appropriate for our house, but they're okay with it.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? And then I just had one last question. Are the new windows aluminum clad wood windows or wood windows?
They're aluminum clad. They're Pella Reserve with OG moldings.
All right. Any other questions? I think we don't have any other questions at this time, so we'll move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And as always, we'll start with anyone who signed up in advance and then get to everyone else. And I will turn it over to our Director of Intergovernmental and Community Affairs, Sonia Gior, to take us through the testimony.
Thank you. So we do have some signups in advance. Our first speaker will be Judy Stanton from the Brooklyn Heights Association. And Judy, I'll be promoting you to panelist now. If you could please accept. And if you could please unmute your mic and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
We think it is appropriate to change the building profile at the top of the Willow Place wall, including demolition. We think it is inappropriate to change the building profile at the top of the Willow Place wall, including demolition of the chimneys. These changes are not necessary to carry out the interior and roof alterations. This building's existing roof line and chimney profile is a frequently seen original design for Greek Revival corner houses, and it should be preserved. The applicant's preference for a new design is not supported by the other buildings offered as context. The photos show that alternative original designs exist, but we do not believe that the other houses represent historical or landmark approved alterations. We do not see a precedent for carrying out this kind of unnecessary change to a visible facade. Regarding the rear facade, we think further study is needed for the design of the new window and door openings on the highly visible rear facade. We appreciate that the applicant has made some changes here since first presented to us, but the current proposal still departs too far from the historical openings pattern, and it does not harmonize with the unchanged upper stories. We also think it would be better for the house to maintain some privacy offered by more modest windows. The rear of this house is not part of a hidden donut like in typical block configurations, but is much closer to a regular street-facing facade. The wide expanse of glass shown in the elevation may not appear on paper to be different from other LPC-approved alterations, but in reality, it is probably too much for this particular location. The windows will still be mostly visible over the proposed fence. We think lengthening the window openings to the floor, but maintaining their existing width and masonry separation would be a better approach. Also, there are no profile drawings on these windows and the door, so they seem to be too preliminary to be ready for approval. We're fine with the porch legalization as an outcome, but we disagree on the proposed contextual rationale. The porch, though post-designation, may have been on this building for almost 40 years. There are many other anachronistic pre-designation alterations in our historic district which are tolerated. This porch can continue to exist just as they do for that reason alone. At the same time, we think it is worth noting that the porch is not historically accurate to One Willow Place, and so it should not be presented as contextual. This is clearly a Greek Revival house. The Gothic Revival houses on the other side of Willow Place, with their distinctive porches and Divisian panels, are both a different style as well as unique within our district. Proximity and distance and construction date does not justify a mix and match approach to alterations. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Christina Conroy from the Victorian Society. And Christina, I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you could please unmute your mic and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society, New York. Founded in New York City in 1966, the Victorian Society in America is dedicated to fostering the appreciation and preservation of our 19th and early 20th century heritage. The New York chapter promotes preservation of our historic districts, individual landmarks, interior, and civic art. Though changes to the window openings of the Girolamo facade are fairly significant, we find the effect of regularizing this secondary facade to be appropriate. We also find appropriate the addition of the wood porch at the entrance, as it is seen in character both with this building and others in the district. However, whether this particular porch should be legalized depends on its detailing, and the presentation doesn't provide enough information on that to make a judgment. We find the loss of chimneys at either end of the Girolamo Street facade to be problematic. The chimneys are significant features whose expression should be retained. Finally, we find the large first floor window at the fully visible rear facade to be inappropriate. It's completely out of character with the buildings in the district. Some enlargement of the openings may be possible, but not this. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next speaker will be Michelle Arbalou from the Historic Districts Council. Michelle, I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your mic and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Michelle Arbalou for the Historic Districts Council. HDC finds this project to be largely appropriate. However, we would note that the rooftop bulkhead is a bit more visible than is typically given the topography and location of this project. We would request that the applicant look at a product called Daylighter Roof Doors, as they have a nice solution for minimizing visibility of rooftop access. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do not have any other speakers signed up in advance, and I'm not seeing any hands raised. So I'll note that Brooklyn Community Board 2 recommends approval, and I'll turn it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you very much, Sonia. Okay, Mr. Mansfield, would you like to respond to any of the comments that we've heard?
The only talking about fenestration, the window at the back, I think that's pretty straight. I mean, it's self-evident that we're obviously enlarging this opening. We've reduced it significantly. It isn't a primary facade, and I think there is an image there which will coming up, which will show how much is visible. The issue of privacy is not a concern of our clients. So they do understand that, you know, the light from the space, the ceiling, will be visible from the sidewalk. In terms of the loss of the chimneys were, we don't know when they were abandoned, but they're currently, there are no fireplaces in the house. So the chimneys are potentially, they are of course a feature of the facade, but there are very few instances, having spent a lot of time walking around Brooklyn Heights, there are very few instances of end of row townhouses expressing the slope of the roof. It's not generally typical. We don't necessarily agree with the idea that this is a typical, that having a sloped parapet and exposed chimneys is typical for an end of row townhouse in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. Maybe in other historic districts, maybe in other neighborhoods in Brooklyn, generally a standard feature, but generally, you know, in Brooklyn Heights, the end facades are generally treated in a more significant, substantive manner. And we're absolutely, you know, making a gesture to do this, and we're obviously here before Landmarks requesting this, so we want to get the feedback. But that's our feeling about this, and in general, we're also open to the idea of, you know, if the bulkhead is not approved, we do want to keep this location, so we would look at something like daylighter roof doors if that's something that would help us get approved. But we'd prefer to have a proper stair bulkhead, but because it's just easier to function and use. But we will be open to that. And in terms of the porch presentation, we apologize that there aren't any detailed photographs of the porch. I can't share them with you right now. Obviously, it's available to look at on the public thoroughfare, but I understand that's not easy for everyone. But yeah, the porch is porch is there, and it is visible in some of our photographs, but true, it's like a little bit lightly detailed.
Okay. All right, commissioners, do we have any final questions? Right, I am not seeing any final questions. Whoops. Oh, Commissioner Gustafson, I just muted you. Sorry about that. I'm catching you all as you're unmuting yourself. Okay. Great. Let's make a motion to close the hearing and begin our discussion. So Commissioner Chen, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Devonshire, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And so there are a number of components. There are the enlarging and creation of new window openings, the new aluminum clad multi-light windows, the legalization of the porch, the modifying of the parapet, and then the rooftop bulkhead and installations behind that parapet. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Bland, would you like to start this one?
I guess so. Know the building very well. My car is often parked right down the street, so I make this corner pretty frequently. You know, this building has been altered over time, many times apparently. So I think what we're seeing is the alteration of an alteration, much of it done before the district was, in fact, the city's first historic district in 1965. Some of it perhaps later, we don't know, I guess, is particularly the porch. So, you know, part of the appeal, even the charm of Brooklyn Heights, is the somewhat discordant sometimes changes to buildings over time, particularly buildings like this that are sideways buildings, you might say, where the front has been, I guess, altered and made into the side. The applicant made a point of this and showed the many that exist in Brooklyn Heights. So I find these kinds of changes, even if they're not pure, to be part of the gestalt, if you will, of the Heights. And I enjoy these kinds of aberrations. They're not pure. It's not a pure, movie set. They're kind of wonderful. So therefore, with that sort of philosophy, I find much of this appropriate. The porch, I accept. The new window arrangements, I accept. The parapet, I accept. The loss of the chimney, I accept. The bulkhead is pretty visible. If there are really no other alternatives, and I asked the question to see if there were alternatives in terms of shortening it or rearranging it in some way. But putting a ladder in the inside, I don't think is a fair way to activate the roof. And I think activating roofs in our entire city is an appropriate and important thing to be doing. So I don't think if the applicant can't rearrange the roof appurtenances, particularly the bulkhead, in a way that would lessen the visibility, I think I can accept it as yet another visible rooftop addition, which is very secondary because of its metal, gray metal application, is something that we see all over the Heights. So I would ask that he look carefully at maybe being able to reduce its visibility, but if not, I think I can accept it, and I can accept the rear large window as well. So therefore, I'm pretty much in an acceptable mood, thinking that this is a series of appropriate changes to a house that's been changed a lot over time.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
Oh, I agree in most of the changes. I just think that the roof bulkhead has to be restudied. I can't approve it. The way it relates to its neighbors and from the fire district.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
Now I can unmute myself. I agree completely with Commissioner Bland, but I do think that they need to study that rooftop bulkhead a little further.
Okay. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
I feel the same way, agree with everything that Commissioner Bland has said, and would like for them to study further the rooftop addition. I mean, the bulkhead addition.
Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Bland as well. And I also think that they should work with the staff to see if the bulkhead can be reduced. I also agree that they shouldn't be forced to use a ladder arrangement instead. This is a corner where there will be a visible accretion on top for any kind of bulkhead. So, but they could work with the staff to try to minimize it. Obviously, I felt like maybe the window should be reduced, that parlor window, because I thought it kind of called attention to itself. But, you know, this was an existing rather very eccentric window arrangement to begin with. So since none of the other commissioners find that particularly troubling, I can go along with this just as it is, except with the proviso they'll work with the staff on the bulkhead.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
No disagreement. I apologize if I might have missed this, but I think that if you just kept the stair going, kind of winding straight up, it would have just been, it would result in a 90-degree rotation of that bulkhead and pushing it further into the middle of the building, which would, I think, be achieving some of the goals that the other commissioners have noted, unless there's some reason that I didn't hear for not doing that. There's just a big skylight that would have to become a smaller skylight or whatever. But if that doesn't work, and I see the applicant's raising his hand, but whatever, I agree with what everyone else says.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire.
I think I agree that the bulkhead should be much less visible. I'm okay with the changes to the parapet. I'm okay with the addition of corner windows. I agree with the Brooklyn Heights Association comments about the rear opening. I think it's not concealed within a donut, and it's far too visible. And having two enlarged, smaller punched openings would solve the issue that they have there. I don't really think we have enough information to approve the porch.
Okay. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I agree with Vice Chair Bland and most of the commissioners are concerned about the bulkhead on the top. If the applicant can, as Michael Goldblum suggested, or Commissioner Jefferson suggested, to somehow reduce the bulkhead, I think that would be ideal.
Okay. All right. So I think that we've had some very good comments, and I think we actually have a majority who would support it, with the provision that they continue to work with the staff to explore ways to reduce the visibility of the bulkhead. I was actually at a site visit recently where, looking at a bulkhead that this commission approved, we happened to just be going to the roof and went up through this bulkhead, and it was one of the sliding glass, mechanical sliding doors that rolls back. And so the slope was in the opposite direction of the stair run. And when the roof just slid away, you could walk up the stairs and walk out. So that would not even involve changing the stair run here, if you could do something like that. But as Commissioner Goldblum noted, there are also opportunities to change how the stair comes to the roof. So I think we'll have the staff continue to work with them on that. And I will go ahead and make this motion. Okay, in the matter of docket number 22-07520 Willow Place, in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District, a Greek Revival style house built in 1849. This is an application to construct a stair bulkhead and install other rooftop elements, alter the parapet, modify and create window openings, and legalize the installation of a porch without Landmarks Preservation Commission permits. And I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the proposed work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features, that the simple massing and sloped roof of the bulkhead will be typical of utilitarian rooftop accretions found at buildings of this type and age in this historic district. The proposed rooftop bulkhead and enclosure will be seen primarily at a distance from oblique angles over secondary facades along Willow Place and Girolamo Street. That the proposed neutral gray metal finish of bulkhead and enclosure will allow it to blend in with the roofscape. That the alterations to the parapet will help to hide the bulkhead and will not cause the removal of significant architectural features and are in keeping with altered parapets typically found at corner buildings within this historic district. That the new and enlarged window openings at the Willow Place facade will be similar in size and scale to the existing openings and will match the historic windows in configuration and details, and thereby maintain the residential character of this building and help to regularize the fenestration pattern at this facade. That the proposed bay of punched window openings near the corner of the Willow Place facade will be in a typical location for windows at corner buildings found within this district. That the proposed multi-light window and door system within the combined new opening at the first floor of the rear facade will only be partially visible over a fence from Willow Place. That the configuration, that the proposed aluminum clad wood windows will recall the historic windows in terms of configuration, finish, profiles, and details. And that the design and placement of the wood porch installed without Landmarks Preservation Commission permits in front of the building's main entrance facing Willow Place is a typical feature found at buildings of this age and style, and that the wood porch will be seen in context with the existing historic porches at row houses on this street. However, we find that the stair bulkhead is prominently visible from Girolamo Street in particular, and we would ask that the applicant continue to explore, working in consultation with staff, options for reducing the visibility of the stair bulkhead, which could include reorienting or setting back the footprint of the bulkhead and other methods. And so with that, Commissioner Bland, would you second the motion?
Second.
All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Nay.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and 1 opposed, the motion passes.
All right, so that's approved with the condition that you continue to work with the staff to explore ways to minimize the visibility of the rooftop bulkhead.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll move to the next item now.
The next item, Commissioners, is item number 3, docket number 22-09843. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the borough of Brooklyn, 356 Hoyt Street in the Carroll Gardens Historic District, Block 450, Lot 41, a stable designed by Stanley S. Covert and built in 1881. The application is to modify facades, enlarge openings, install infill, and construct a bulkhead.
Okay, Commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. John, you now have control of the presentation. You can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. Please state your name for the record and you may begin.
Okay, thank you very much. John Hathaway here. Good morning, Chair Sarah Carroll, and to the commissioners. I represent the owners of 356 Hoyt Street in their application to renovate this building. And excuse me just one second. I'm trying to advance the screen to, there we go. And anyway, I'm representing them in their application to renovate this building to convert it from a 2-family residence to a 1-family. The owners, Annie and Seth Hillinger, are present and available to answer questions if you might have some for them at the end of this. 356 Hoyt Street is in the Carroll Gardens Historic District at the very southeast corner of this small 2-block district. And as you can see from the block plan, it is essentially a freestanding building at the short end of a block. The building has an interesting and unusual history for the neighborhood, having first been built as a stable and then later converted to a mixed-use building with a store at the first floor and residence above. Over time, the store, seen here in the 1940 tax photo on the left, was reduced as a second apartment was created in the rear. And eventually the store was eliminated altogether, as seen in the photo on the right, during renovations in 1959, when a C of O was issued for a 2-family dwelling. And we propose and request approval for work at the roof level, the north and south facades, and the first floor front facade as a part of the renovation. It will make 356 Hoyt a functional building for a family with young children. The 2 top functional priorities for this project are creation of useful outdoor space and making the building energy efficient. The lot has just a 2-foot deep rear yard that is mostly occupied by light wells for cellar windows. Therefore, we propose to use the roof as private outdoor space. All 4 walls of the building are exposed and uninsulated, and we intend to comply with the 2020 Energy Code standards for new construction. As such, providing a layer of continuous insulation on the north and south walls is important for us to meet that. And you can see in the original tax photo, it was brick, not a finished brick. And we'll have more about the condition of those side facades in a minute. I say that the building is essentially freestanding, but it's just important to note that the building is actually set 9 inches off of the north lot line. And so there's a separation from the 1-story garage. That separation is actually evident in this tax photo. There's a little infill piece there. But later on in the current photo, you can see that the garage facade was rebuilt and that closes the gap. So the building has a roof that slopes from the rear toward the front, as you can see in the lower right-hand photo. And that is partially echoed in the sloping parapet wall and the side facades. The side facades have aluminum siding covering the original brick. We propose to remove this siding and replace it with a layer of rigid insulation covered by cement stucco. Our probes have revealed, as you can see in the second and third photos on the top row there, that the walls were coated, the north and the south walls were coated on the with tar before the aluminum siding was added. The tar is very well adhered. I can vouch for that. I'm the one holding that scraper trying to pry some stuff off there. It's still pliable, I'll say almost impossible to get off of there without damaging any brick. Also take note of the wide side bend at the south corner of the front facade over here, this fourth photo. That's due to the aluminum siding projecting all the way to the front facade. And there's a reason why it's particularly wide right there, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So as the black plan shows, the building 1 story shorter than its neighbors at the corners of the block. And you can also see that Hoyt Street is not perpendicular to Carroll and 2nd Streets. This massing diagram highlights the stair bulkhead that we propose to add to access the our proposed roof terrace. And it shows the extension of the side parapet walls at the north and south facades. The higher parapet will conceal the view of the bulkhead from the north within the historic district and minimize its apparent size from the south. The parapet wall does not exceed the height of the original chimney at the north wall. You can see the chimneys that we're removing are highlighted in red there. And the parapet steps mimic the parapet wall steps in adjacent houses at the end of the block, which again are shown in this massing diagram. You'll also see that in these photos at the lower row of photos show the end wall conditions. At the left, Hoyt and 2nd Street, middle, Carroll and 2nd, and Carroll and Hoyt, and on the right, it's the far corner of Carroll and Hoyt. Let's see, that was, and then I just note that, of course, there's other roof bulkheads and other appurtenances visible within this district. Just in fact, 349, shown in the 2 center photos on the top row, has both railings and a stair bulkhead visible and is within the historic district. So we studied visibility of our proposed bulkhead and the appearance of the sidewalls from various points along Hoyt Street. And this is point A, and in each of the series of photos here, you'll see the mock-up on the left and rendering done over the mock-up on the right. And here's most remote point and where the bulkhead might be most visible. Then another photo moving up Hoyt Street to the north, and then crossing Hoyt Street, the step in the proposed parapet wall extension is visible. And then from the north side, viewpoint F shows the where the entire facade length would be visible across the street. And point G is, it's coming here, I think. Oops, I just skipped 2. Point G is the location, the northernmost location where any part of the bulkhead might be visible. And of course, it's designed not to be visible. The site section here from point G also demonstrates that the bulkhead is below the line of sight there. And point E, excuse me, which is directly in front of the house, the visibility line there shows that, of course, the bulkhead and the parapet wall extensions are not visible over the primary facade. The red solid line indicates the line of the existing parapet wall, and the red dotted line indicates the line of the existing roof, which of course we are lowering. The roof line is being lowered so that the parapet wall is 42 inches above the roof, so no railing is required along either side wall. These are photographs of the mock-ups we constructed at the roof. The 2 center photos down the bottom are where the railing is that defines the extent of our roof terrace, which is set well back from the front facade. And the upper, well, I'll start for the lower right photo. That's a photo of another bulkhead that we did in the Henderson Place Historic District in Manhattan, and we propose to use the same materials in this job. The upper right corner, the board that is tacked onto the side facade shows that the wall actually has a hinge point where it squares up to the front facade. And I'll talk more about that later, but I just wanted to make that point here because this is where it is most obvious. And our existing section, and again, showing how our roof line is being modified via that dotted line. And this is our north wall, and existing and proposed, of course, showing the removal of the aluminum siding, and on the new stucco applied over 2 inches of rigid insulation. The rigid, you'll see a line distinguishing change in stucco right toward the front of the facade here. That's where the rigid insulation actually ends, and the stucco returns to the face of the brick. And that also delineates the point at which the first step in the parapet wall occurs. The rear facade shows the roof top work. And then moving around to the south facade, again, existing and proposed. And again, there's this delineation of a sort of this step in the stucco facade as it approaches the front facade. And that small photo and over on the left side there shows the construction of the furring and aluminum siding that was attached to both of those long side facades. And the section on the right shows how we intend to insulate this wall, both of these long walls, with rigid insulation on the inside and on the exterior, and cavity wall on the cavity insulation on the interior. Now returning to point E, again, directly in front of the building. Excuse me while I take one sip of water. The photo on the left shows that none of the mock-up is visible here. The photo on the right, we render in our proposed changes at the first floor. There is this heavy lintel that runs all the way across the width of the facade that was visible in the 1940 tax photos. And you can clearly see in the left photo the outline of the brick infill that occurred back in 1959. Here are our actual drawn elevations. And the entry door and transom are designed to match the door in the tax photo, except that the door will not have a glass panel. We are fortunate that the original vestibule door, which matches the front door in the tax photo, remains in the house and can serve as a template for the new door. A wood pilaster, it will separate the door from the window area. And while no record exists of what the first floor looked like, the structure of the facade allows us to imagine what might have been. This window configuration is meant to evoke both a large center doorway for a horse stable and the openness of the later storefront, all while serving its modern purpose of providing natural light and ventilation for the residents. The new windowsill line matches the height of the current windows, which is sufficient to provide a decent amount of privacy for the owners. The continuous vertical mullions between the operable windows and the center picture window are intended to accentuate the height of the center section, the verticality of that. And the frames and sashes are intended to be minimal in profile and detail to distinguish them from the historically residential windows at the second floor. Wood panels below the windows carry the lines of the sashes from above. And here we have a section through the door, a section through the window, and a detail section through the window. The sketch on the left, excuse me, the right there, it shows how the vertical mullions are used to inset the center window by 2 inches, further articulating that part of the opening. These plan sections show they also show this play in the depth of the facade. Another important detail is the termination of the insulation at the sidewalls, which I referred to earlier. The current siding leaves wide bands at the corners of the brick facade that form an unwanted frame. And with the insulation terminating 6 inches back from the facade at that hinge point, it allows the stucco to cut back and then be applied only straight to the brick in that last 8 inches. And the stucco terminates at the front facade corner with a chamfered edge. And we studied and documented the conversion of stables, carriage houses, and commercial storefronts to residential use. A common characteristic in these successful transitions is the maintenance or restoration of the original facade openings, which is obviously what we're after on this project too. The function of these within these openings has changed, but they allow one to imagine what was once there. And this slide of the rendered front elevation and side elevation shows our finish selections. The front facade is only modified at the first floor, and we propose a low luster black finish for all the new work there. The railing and bulkhead above the cornice are set back, and so therefore, of course, not visible. The bulkhead's only visible over the south facade. And we're using a darker colored stucco, something that distinguishes it from the brick, but is in the same general color family. Something akin to the, I guess I'll say the common brick that was used at the side facades originally, as opposed to the face brick at the front facade. And I think that the result of all this will give the owners a functional, energy efficient home that is respectful to its architectural history and respectful to its neighbors. And I do have floor plans here. This concludes my presentation. So thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I might have missed it. The edge of that little return that we've been talking about, a lot. It shows on drawing 25 as exposed brick, but then you're covering it over with stucco with that little chamfered edge. Is there any reason why you're covering it over?
Yes, well, there's two reasons, and one I have to admit is an error on my drawing to say that it's exposed brick. It was our original intention to expose the brick, but trying to strip this tar off without damaging the brick seems to be almost impossible. I'll also say that the brick, whether it's because it had started to deteriorate or not, and I'm going to just flip back to an existing photo here to show you this, is not even. Hold on, I'm just about to get there. Sorry, I got to go all the way back through these visibility photos. But there's this is one of the real concerns in this thing, is how to deal with that brick. Again, the photo with the center photo there, where I have the blue tool in my hand trying to pry the tar off the brick, you can see that the brick is not exactly even there. And this is, again, just above the parapet wall of the garage.
Got it.
Opening there.
I see it. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, other questions? All right, I don't see any other questions at this time, so we'll move to public testimony. And if you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And we'll start, as always, with anyone who signed up in advance. And I will turn it over to Sonia Gior to take us through the testimony.
Thank you. We do have some signups in advance. So we'll start with Michelle Arbalou from the Historic Districts Council. And Michelle, I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, Michelle Arbalou for the Historic Districts Council. HDC finds this project generally appropriate. However, we would note that the proportions of the storefront window system would benefit from a lower sill and perhaps more vertical divisions. We appreciate the applicant may be trying to achieve a certain level of privacy for pedestrian looking in, but believe that there may be an alternate way of achieving that goal. HDC would also like to encourage the commission to require that the applicant strip and repoint the brick walls rather than allowing them to be stuccoed. We understand that the raised parapets will read differently from the restored brick walls, but believe that exposing the building's history of use will be more appropriate than brownstone stucco would be. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Christina Conroy from the Victorian Society. Christina, I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you can please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society, New York. It would have been useful to see an earlier image of the carriage house before the storefront was installed and to look to that for cues on the detailing for the new infill. We suggest that if the design is looking to the 1939 tax photo for inspiration, the proposed bulkhead is higher than the 1939 version and suffers in proportion. We also think that the proposed design for the very visible sidewalls of stucco with pronounced expansion joints is not appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. So we do not have any other signups in advance, and I'm not seeing any hands raised. So I'll note for the record that Brooklyn Community Board 6 recommends approval. And I'll turn it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'd like to turn back to you, John, and see if you'd like to respond to the comments we've heard.
Sure. I'll first take the HDC comments and the brick. I mean, stripping that brick just isn't going to happen. I mean, we destroy the brick trying to do that, and it'd be less expensive to rebuild both walls than to try to strip that brick. And quite frankly, stripping the brick goes, stripping it back, all the way back to the original brick just sort of runs contrary to also part of what we're trying to achieve in terms of making this an energy efficient house, of course. But I think you all can recognize that trying to somehow restore this brick to its original appearance is impossible. As far as more vertical divisions and windows at the front, you know, I don't think that that's, I'm not sure exactly where that comment is coming from, whether it's a notion of trying to make this a more residential scale at the first floor. I think that anything that, you know, tries to speak to that is almost a false narrative, but I worry that any further vertical lines start to create potentially haphazard or illogical alignments with the windows up above. And in fact, the side piers at the first floor don't match in width with the brick at the corners, the width of the brick at the corners at the second floor either. I don't think that's really, I don't know, a great suggestion. With regard to the Victorian Society's comments, I mean, believe me, I tried every avenue to attain photos that predated the 1940 tax photos and could find none. No drawings, no photos, nothing. So I think that really is left to our imagination. And I think that quite frankly, as I said in my presentation, you know, this structure here certainly allows us to understand that there was, you know, that this was a large and rather flexible opening when it was originally built. And I don't, I think it allows us, I guess, a certain amount of creativity to occur here in terms, or imagination to happen in terms of what might be. But it struck me that this center picture window roughly replicates what might have been a portion of a carriage house door at one point. And I'm trying to remember what else, the bulkhead. I mean, you know, the bulkhead, yes, it's going to be visible over the south facade. Obviously, we've done everything we can to try to minimize its apparent massiveness, but this is really the only open outdoor space on the whole lot, and we really want to try to take care of it in a relatively easily accessible manner, something that Commissioner Bland was referring to in the previous application. So I think that's all I have to say right now.
Sorry. Thank you. One question back to the stucco on the side.
Yeah.
There were comments about the expansion joints, and I don't know if there is any flexibility in how many and where they go. And in addition, I wonder, you know, the brownstone color, I mean, it's sort of, rather than trying to recall a brownstone material, which wouldn't have been on the side facade, did you think about doing something that's just sort of a beige neutral stucco that looks like so many other Parch side facades?
Yes, to the last question, but let me go back to the first thing. Because of the length of this facade, we need an expansion, a vertical expansion joint. And the horizontal ones are really more intended as control joints for any cracking or something. But felt that if we're going to have one vertical, that just one vertical looked a little weird. And that, you know, maybe I'd certainly be open to reconsidering the gridding here, but I think it's appropriate to have some in any case. But as far as the color, we're certainly open to discussing the color. We really were trying to reference more of the color of the original brick, and obviously the 1940 tax photo was black and white, so it's a little hard to get an exact hue off of that. But knowing the side, looking at the rear facades of other buildings in the district, it is a redder, a browner color than the typical face brick. And so that's really what we were going for. And if it looks a little too much like brownstone, then I'm clearly rendering it too dark, I guess I'll say. And that that wasn't the intention, that it looks like brownstone.
Okay, great, thanks. Other questions, commissioners? Any final questions? All right, I am starting to send you all requests to unmute. All right, and Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
No second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the hearing's closed and we'll begin our discussion, which will include discussing the changes to the front, which is to sort of restore the size of the original opening and to do infill that evokes a later storefront that was in this opening, and to do a new stair bulkhead on the roof, and then on the sidewall to step up the parapet and reclad it with insulation and stucco. So Commissioner Gustafson, would you like to start this one?
Yeah. Well, let's see. Let's start with this. Obviously, there were a lot of alterations on this structure that that aren't particularly don't make it particularly special at the moment. So a lot of the work that's being done here is a great improvement and is much appreciated. The storefront is the thing that I think is the thing that sort of draws my attention most. I think that the concepts that I think I heard the Victorian Society talk about the idea that they're sort of missing cues here, which is to say, I think they can achieve what they want to with the large window and the door there. But I think the devil's in the details there, and they need to really work with staff to refine this. And maybe that includes, how the entire ensemble works together. Because at the moment, I don't think it does. And that's the thing that I think that bothers me most. I think I'm actually going to, in terms of the only other issue for me is the stepping of the parapet and the and that side and the stucco. And I think I want to hear what other commissioners have to say about it before I commit on that.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Yeah, I think that I agree. With some of the comments about the storefront, there's something about it that seems, even though we don't have real the current condition is not original and it's not inspiring per se, but I think there was something about whether the testimonies request that they insert sort of more lines, vertical or horizontal. The tax photo, I think, at least has a continuous bar that creates a kind of a transom continuously. And I think that might help a bit, and or the proportions of the image in the text photo. And I can't quite tell, and I think none of us can, what exactly was going on in terms of the color of the storefront. But maybe there's another aspect too, which has to do with the fact that it's rendered here as black or very, very dark, and has a relationship obviously with the windows and with the existing cornice, but maybe it can be lightened up a bit gray. I don't know. I'm not sure, but I think it does need a little bit of work. And while I don't love the stepping of the parapet, I think to imagine it continuous, sort of a not stepping and at the height that would be required to shield, to kind of cover view of the bulkhead is sort of less desirable. So I can accept the stepping, even though it's not ideal, of the parapet, because I think it does help a bit. I also agree with you, Chair Carroll, that the color of the stucco or whatever is applied to that wall should be not sort of brownstone colored. And I understand that they explained that that's not exactly their intent either. So to work with staff to refine that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
I think that, I think the parapet line should not be so, it's just too much going on. It should be just much more simple. It should be simplified because it kind of calls attention to itself. And I agree with you about, the color on the side should be somewhat lighter. There's, like Commissioner Gustafson, the storefront bothers me. We permit a lot of storefront variations. Obviously, this is, I think supposed to be generally residential, but so it just isn't it isn't working in the sense that it just doesn't seem to fit. And part of it, yes, maybe the dark color, possibly if the door were lighter, Commissioner Shimmer Barron suggested that maybe a gray for the trim. I was thinking maybe if they just kept the brick course on the top across, they want a window there, obviously, but the window could maybe drop a little instead and have the brick course run across and just have the transom on the door. So it looks a little bit more residential in character even, but would be okay with me. I don't know I shouldn't design this. So, but I think it's not really working. It needs some modification, and perhaps some of the architects on the panel can give some suggestions for the direction for it to go in. But I think in general, the whole idea is something I can definitely approve. That's not an issue if they kind of clean up the parapet and do some work on the first floor there to just make it, more appropriate in proportions and things somehow. So I'm going to stop because I'm not sure exactly what they need to do here.
Okay.
Working. Thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner Goldblum?
Okay, thank you. I think that everyone's comments about the parapet I agree with. I think this building had angled parapets or has angled parapets. So continuing in that language would probably be less aggressive visually than the stepping, while accomplishing the goals that you want to accomplish. I think that the intention to go to a brick color as opposed to a gray, like a simple gray, is not a bad one. It's an appropriate one, but you have to work with staff on getting the color right. The storefront didn't bother me terribly, but I hear what other people are saying. I think that to throw in a suggestion among the others that you'll get, consider maybe lowering it to the ground. You're frosting it anyway. I think part of the reason it looks domestic is the kind of Chicago window layout that has a kind of very domestic scale to it. You wouldn't see in a storefront, and part of it is the high belt line. So you might want to think about those. I would just suggest looking at the tax photo and kind of looking at the proportions of the infill and kind of working off of that. I would also suggest, while you're going to attack that big window, try to find ways to avoid frosting the whole thing. That tends to be very antithetical to the kind of streetscape that storefronts create. And you can gain your privacy in a lot of different ways, the shades or curtains or things like that. I would just suggest that you consider that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire?
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues. The front, that storefront isn't really working. And again, I mean, there are many different approaches they could take. I would recommend working with staff greatly and improving that. I'm okay with the bulkhead. With regard to the side wall, in fact, you could remove that tar from the brick by using dry ice, which embrittles the tar, and then you can break it off. That costs about $75 to $90 a square foot, which would probably destroy this project. And what that would get you is most likely very less vitrified brick than on the front facade, because it was intended to be not exposed. And so what you would be doing is exposing some really horrible brick that you would then say, well, we have to replace all this brick. And so the entire journey would be folly. And so I'm okay with what they're doing. I'm assuming that the control joints and expansion joints in the stucco are what are industry standards. They don't need to do any more, and they shouldn't do any less. So whatever the industry standard is for that, I think it's 20 feet for verticals. They should follow. I agree completely that this color is wrong. It should be much lighter and more neutral. I'm with Adi on the stepping of the parapet. I think it's completely appropriate. I do not think it draws attention to itself. I think if it did anything else, it would.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I agree with most of the comments. I think I won't play designer here, but obviously the proportion and the detailing and is where the commissioners have their concerns. And I agree with the color, and I agree with Adi about the stepping as well, as Michael just mentioned. Yeah, I really think they should work with the staff to refine the proportions and the details.
Commissioner Bland?
I think the overall approach is a good one, but on 3 levels, it's inappropriate for me. The stepping seems wrong to me. I think I would prefer just a simple 1 step even further back. But again, not sure I need to be the designer here, not trying to be, but maybe you'd explore the angle as well. So that's one thing. The color of the stucco is wrong, has been suggested by many. It should be a neutral tone, as we're commonly see on sidewalls like this. And the last thing is the window, the infill. I heard Chicago window, and that made me think better of it than my version of what I see, which is a suburban house from the 1950s. And I think that's really wrong. So I think it just needs to be restudied. And I think a big plate glass window like that is kind of probably part of the problem. So it probably needs to be infilled in some way. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. All right, so I think we're all in agreement on many aspects of this, that conceptually, the project can be found appropriate, except that there are still some areas that need some work, which includes refining the proportions and details of the storefront window, changing the color of the stucco on the side wall and doing the minimum amount of control joints necessary, and simplifying the stepped parapet. And are you all comfortable with the staff handling those final refinements?
Chair Carroll, did Commissioner Jefferson comment?
No, I'm so sorry, Commissioner Jefferson, please go ahead, and then we'll go back to that question.
Okay, I'll start with the stepping parapet. The examples he showed were taller buildings, larger scale buildings to kind of show precedent of the stepping. I think the stepping is too much. I think the simple line would be best. The angular line, as suggested by one of the commissioners, makes sense to me. The windows, it's too heavy and should be simplified. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. All right. So I think maybe if you feel that you're not comfortable with the staff handling these final refinements, then why don't you raise your virtual hand so I can see that? Okay. All right. So
That's virtual hand.
Virtual hand, yeah. Because I can see that before I can see all of your boxes. Okay, so it looks like we're all comfortable with the staff finalizing these details. Yes, Commissioner Bland, are you not comfortable with that?
Muted.
Yeah, I got a lot of background kids playing around me often. I'm not. I think the front window is a huge design issue and a huge design problem. So I think I'd like to see it again. I have incredible respect for our staff, but I think we're throwing the issue away, and we should see it again.
Okay. All right. Do others agree? Do others feel the same? No.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Okay, so I think we may have enough to approve it working with the staff. And I think that the staff has a lot of experience looking at historic storefronts that have been installed within former carriage houses, and also other examples where we've approved infill that is more evocative of carriage house stores, both for residential uses. So I am confident that they will get the right proportions and details. And as Commissioner, yeah.
I might even add that the applicant showed us a lot of examples, all of which I think were more in the vein of what I would be suggesting. So maybe the applicant is already, if he just uses his own imagery, it might help.
Agree. And as Commissioner Shamir Barron said, the continuous transom in the tax photo may be a good place to start, but then you have to think about the proportions below and how you make that work. And so if everybody else is comfortable with that, then why don't we make a motion to approve it with the condition that they continue to refine the proportions and details and color of the storefront, the color and stepped profile of the side wall, the stucco side wall. Commissioner Gustafson, would you feel comfortable making that motion?
Sure, I'll take a shot, subject to you cleaning up the mess. In the matter of LPC 22-09843, 356 Hoyt Street in the Carroll Gardens Historic District, the application is to modify facades and large openings, install infill, and construct a bulkhead. I know that the building scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Carroll Gardens Historic District. I recommend approval with a couple of modifications, that the proposed work will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural features, that the 20th century alterations are not unique or representative of exceptional details or craftsmanship. Therefore, the work will not eliminate a significant later alteration, that the presence of a large opening at the ground floor of the front facade will be in keeping with the historic evolution of the building, including its original use as a stable and its early 20th century commercial use, which contained a storefront. that the proposed infill will be in keeping with infill found in buildings of this age in terms of scale and finishes, that the replacement of the aluminum siding of the side facades as stucco and insulation will only modestly increase the thickness of the walls and will help improve energy efficiency of this largely freestanding building. That the stucco will be in keeping with typical modern coatings at secondary facades throughout the historic district, that the presence of step parapets will be consistent with the treatment of side facades of neighboring buildings within this streetscape, as well as with secondary facades elsewhere in the historic district, subject to a comment, that the coping covers will be simply detailed and finished in a neutral color, helping them remain a discreet presence, and that the rooftop bulkhead will be simply designed typical in terms of materials and finishes and only visible from public thoroughfares from select vantage points over secondary facades. However, I find that the number of steps at the parapets, and perhaps whether there should be steps, the stucco's dark shade and joint pattern, and the abrupt change in plane at the side facades aligning with the edge of the installation will be atypical and draw undue attention to the alterations to those facades, and that the proportions detailing color and mix of materials of the infill will form an awkward and unresolved composition. Therefore, I recommend that the shaping of the parapet, whether it's steps or not, and joints at the stucco be reduced, creating a simpler profile and pattern, that the stucco be modified to help reduce the abrupt change in plane of the side walls and the color be reconsidered, and that the proportions detailing color and mix of materials of the infill of the be refined in consultation with the commission staff.
Thank you. All right. And Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
With 9 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
So please do continue to work with the staff. And we'll move to the next item.
Thank you.
The next item, Commissioners, is item number 4, docket number 22-08731, 6301 12th Avenue, also known as 6301 to 6323 12th Avenue, and 1202, 1216, 63rd Street, and 1201, 1215, 64th Street, the Angel Guardian Home, an individual landmark. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 5739, Lot 1. A Renaissance Revival Beaux-Arts style orphanage building designed by George H. Streeton and built in 1889, with additions built in circa 1910. The application is to remove religious iconography, including crosses and stained glass, replace entrance infill and windows, construct a rooftop bulkhead and courtyard additions, install rooftop mechanical equipment and railings, modify and remove ironwork, install a fire stair and ramp, alter the hardscape and boundary walls, and install signage and light fixtures.
Okay, Commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. John, you now have control of the presentation. You just need to click on your screen.
Thank you.
And then you can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. Please state your name for the record and you may begin.
I'm John England with BKSK Architects. Actually, I'm going to cede my place immediately to Harry Kendall of BKSK Architects, who will begin a brief introduction.
So good morning, Chair Carroll. Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for hearing us. I'm Harry Kendall with BKSK Architects. As Caroline said, this is this proposal involves an individual landmark, the former Angel Guardian Home Orphanage, built in 1899 for the Sisters of Mercy, and it's in Dyker Heights. It's the only landmark in Dyker Heights, and it's the first time we've ever presented to a community board their first landmark presentation. The proposal is to convert the building to a yeshiva. I think you'll see that the building is very well suited for this. As it happens, I was present at the public hearing when this building was designated, and I think that I'll be so bold to say this is the sort of thing one would have hoped for. So we're very, this is a very good news presentation in my opinion. BKSK has been assisting BDF design in developing the scope, the approach, and the details. And I'll be presenting these along with my colleague John England. But first, a representative Gur Yeshiva who purchased the site in 2020, Yeshiel Siegel, will introduce himself and the yeshiva's mission.
Harry, I don't see Yechiel on my screen.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, there he is. There you are.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Yechiel Siegel, and I'm a representative for Talmud Torah Imre Emes de Chasidei Gur, a yeshiva for the Gur International Hasidic sect, will be the future occupants of the Angel Guardian Home in Dyker Heights in Brooklyn. The yeshiva was founded 5 years ago in September of 2017, and already has an enrollment of 450 male students ages ranging from pre-K through 8th grade. In just a few years, the yeshiva has gained renown in the ultra-religious and Hasidic sectors as one of the primary educational institutions in the borough. The school is divided into several divisions and boasts a high-level curriculum in religious and secular studies, as well as several programs geared at promoting manners, ethics, and moral values, and developing skills and talents. An entire division staff with professional and educators is dedicated to provide special education and a plethora of up-to-date remedial and therapeutical services for the underprivileged individuals. The students enjoy an array of classes and activities and thrive in a very positive and motivated environment, surrounded and guided by outstanding and devoted staff. Students eagerly participate in additional weekend and summer programs. Yeshiva is also the nucleus of the local Gur community, establishing a myriad of educational and assistance programs, communal events, and various publications. However, the growing yeshiva has been residing in a rented, cramped space since its founding and has been searching desperately for a suitable home. The Angel Guardian Home was the perfect choice, a spacious, beautiful campus where the yeshiva can expand and further its purposes and goals. The rich past of the home and its recent designation as a landmark only added to the appropriateness of this place, as it will continue to serve as a beacon of kindness and religious education for young children. The Jewish heritage is steeped in rich history. Tradition is an integral part of our education and our lifestyle. We believe that the past is the foundation of the future. We build on the past and work to enrich history. We denounce forging or altering, let alone erasing any part of history. It is our goal to impart in our children the importance of looking up to previous generations, looking back at what they've done and accomplished, thus looking forward to improve society and mankind. The journey of working with landmarks and developing the plans presented here today was both exciting and committing. We learned so much about the Angel Guardian Home, and we toil to preserve whatever we can. After all, every stone has a story, each brick its own tale. It is our sincere desire and ultimate goal that our students absorb this message as they walk through the very same archway as young children did more than a century ago. Honor and cherish the past, aspire to learn from and emulate the ways and lessons of your forebears, appreciate your heritage, and also pay attention to detail, to every cornice, every motif. There is so much there, so much to learn from. Thank you.
So thank you, Yechiel. So as you can imagine, we're very excited to be associated with this effort that will reanimate the building in many ways that are by and large aligned with the architecture, and especially that it will remain devoted to community service as it has for all of its life. So let's move on to the next sheet. This is
sorry, Harry.
This is to orient you. The main front of the building is on 12th Avenue, side streets 64th and 63rd Street. And the building, as you'll see, has a main building and two wings. The red dotted line represents the limits of the protected site. It's important to note that the orphanage originally occupied a full block, was a complex of buildings, and that the front yard was able to be more of a contemplative outdoor space, and the recreation happened in the rear yard. That's not available to the school. That's not part of the protected site. So the yeshiva which also needs outdoor space, will be making use of the front yard for a wider range of activities than it historically has been. John, next, please. A touch more history. George Streeton, the architect, was noted for the design of Catholic churches in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Staten Island, including the Cathedral Basilica of St. James in Brooklyn and St. Joseph on 6th Avenue in Greenwich Village. He was an accomplished architect, and this building shows it. The main building stood for more than a decade, as you see in the upper right, before it wings were added in 1910, a chapel wing on 64th Street and a school wing on 63rd Street. The school wing was enlarged slightly in 1917, and the orphanage closed in the 1980s. Next, please. Just let you examine this for a moment to understand the existing conditions. The principal facade faces north, with secondary street facades on the west and the east. We'll return to all these facades in greater detail, but in general, building is pretty much intact. It just needs substantial care, and I hope you agree that what we propose we'll be doing that. None of the current windows, except the stained glass windows of the chapel wing, are original. We'll be replacing them, and we'll obviously talk in more detail about that. The cornices and roof material are a mix of original and new. The main building's cornice is a fiberglass replacement. We'll be repairing and restoring everything, but not replacing and materials that were substituted for the original or we're keeping in place, with the exception of the roof railing, which is not original, and we have found a way to remove that altogether. So I think that will be a great improvement. Next, please. The rear facade is the most altered part of the complex on all three buildings in the complex. The fire escapes and related doors and additional basement spaces were added and then recently removed, all leaving scars. The orange netting you see in this photograph, which is taken from what's a composite photograph, it's taken from what is now a private yard, but which we have some access to. This is not from a public way, but you'll see that we're showing areas of mechanical equipment and an elevator overrun bulkhead on the upper right that we will, of course, be explaining in greater detail. Next, please. Again, just to understand the existing conditions, I talked about the mix of old and new. The original slate is on the chapel wing, which will be retained. Otherwise, the roofing will be repaired and kept in good condition. Next. So you'll see that our proposed work involves careful alterations throughout, and I'll focus for just a moment on that we're creating 5 entrances. 4 of them exist. One of them is new on the 63rd Street, the triangle on the lower right. 2 of them will be accessible. The 63rd Street ramp plays double duty. It gives access to this one. It's proximate to the elevator and access to the school wing, and it also provides handicap access to the front yard, play yard, which otherwise many more alterations would need to be done to make the stepped path from 12th Avenue accessible. That works in tandem with the 64th Street entrance on the lower left, which requires very few alterations to gain barrier-free access to that door. Together, they solve the situation that is a code generated and also generated by the difference in functional requirements between a yeshiva and an orphanage. So enough preamble. John England will jump into the details and move quickly through a wide range of careful work that we've conceived.
So just to reinforce what Harry said, a primary difference between the school and an orphanage is that in the school, you have many students coming and going from the building several times a day. So a large part of the effort on this building has been to make movement in and out of the building easier for children which are quite young. So as Harry said, we have we're creating 2 new accessible entrances, and then we're improving 2 existing entrances here on either side of the main building, which will serve a public assembly space in the cellar. And we're I should say, relaxing the stair entrance to 12th Avenue a bit to make, again, passage through this gateway, which was, I'm sure, formerly not very heavily used, into something that can be accommodate larger volumes of students. So this slide is a place for us to just quickly summarize what we're intending to propose here. The first of which is to convert what was formerly an ornamental front yard into a play space for the students, as that's the only outside space accessible, available to the students, and to create and to improve these existing and new openings for the students, to install a modern heating and air conditioning system. And I'm happy to say that we and BDF have found a way to keep the main building roof from getting cluttered up with mechanical equipment, and we have been able to locate it in like secondary roofs in the back and on the roofs between the main building and the wings. And then finally, of course, there's the question of moving students from floor to floor, which has required the construction of an elevator, which you can see is this black square here on the corner. And then work on the exterior is primarily kind of maintenance level work. We're proposing to replace the existing aluminum windows with new aluminum double hung windows, leaving what remains of the existing, the original wood windows in place. And of course, in a school, and particularly a school of this type, security is very important. So there is site lighting and security devices and cameras that would need to be deployed in order to protect the safety of the children. So here we see at the top a drone photograph of the building prior to beginning of any work, and at the bottom a rendering of the proposed play surface, which will retain a number of the healthier and more attractive of the trees in the front yard, retaining the existing street wall and painted steel fence, which we'll look at in a little more detail, and the privet hedge, which stands behind that, will all remain in place. There's a hedge also on either side of the entry to the building, which will be retained at least on the where it flanks the proposed new entry steps, and then will be removed in order to provide access to the front yard play space. And planting in front of the building likewise will remain. You can see something we look at in a little more detail. Site lighting is being proposed as modern fixtures along the perimeter of the site, fairly tall in order to light the play surface and the sidewalk, and lower fixtures flanking the walk and the walks leading to the side entrances in the space between the two wings. Our thought was a modern fixture rather than a fixture recalling the early 20th century lighting is more respectful to the building and helps to identify these fixtures as modern additions to the building and not original to the building. On the left side of the site, you can see there's a fence which will recall the existing fence, which segregates the tot lot from the rest of the play surface. Plans of the building, you can see at the basement level here on the lower right, we have a large public assembly space, which is largely served by these two entrances, which were formerly very utilitarian, I should say maybe tertiary entrances to the building, and in addition supplemented by the two accessible entrances, which we're proposing at the sides of the building. As you move up into the building, you see primarily classroom spaces, these large, relatively square spaces, and some administrative space. The primary entrance, the accessible entrance to the building for the students is the youngest students is through the 63rd Street entrance, and so the elevator is placed close to that entry, and also placed so that we have adequate circulation in front of the elevator, between the elevator and the classrooms without compromising the size of the classrooms. In orange, you can see where we're proposing to place mechanical equipment on largely on the roof of a kitchen extension, which is not original to the building. We don't know much about exactly when it was built, and slipping some mechanical in spaces in between the main building and the wings. And as we move up through the building, you see essentially more classroom space. And it's also worth noting that every single floor on this building is devoted to classroom space. At the roof, we're proposing the placement of a few exhaust fans and the elevator bulkhead, which is reduced to the lowest height that the elevator mechanism can tolerate. At the front of the building, not many profound changes. We're delighted to see that we can, because we're not placing much equipment on the roof, we can remove this existing fence and restore the building to something closer to its original location. And because this is an orphanage converted to a yeshiva, we're proposing to remove the Christian iconography, which on this facade consists of crosses on the dormers and some details which we'll get into when we get closer to the entrance. The school is proposing to put some lettering on the front of the building identifying the school and in some cases the entrances, and the precise location of speakers and security devices and is still under development. You can see here these elements are indicated in green, and these are probably not their final locations. It's something we still need to develop. The other changes at the entrance, as I say, are proposing improvements to these entrances between the wing and the main buildings, and some changes to the entrance to the building, which we'll go into in a little bit more detail in order to make it a bit more capable of handling the traffic in and out of the building. Rendering of the building, you can see what I described, much improved, I think, by the removal of the guardrail at the top of the building. Signage above the second floor windows. And you can begin to see what we're proposing to do with the windows, which are, we can go into a little bit more detail, but you can see we have round head windows on the third floor, square head windows with transoms on the second floor and the first floor, and some others which we'll talk about when we get around to the sides. Here we have a little more detail on the site lighting, and you can begin to get a better sense of what we're proposing for the entry, where we're proposing to widen the gate at the entrance. I'll show you a rendering of that in a moment. And as they say, also easing the steps entering up into the front, which actually I think makes the entry sequence a bit more gracious. On the side elevations, the work is very similar to what's happening in the front here. We're proposing to remove the guardrail at the roof, replace the windows, repair the leaders. On this side, the 63rd Street elevation, you can see at the bottom image a ramp which we're proposing to come up to the basement level and into the building through an enlarged window opening, retaining the existing width of the opening and lintel. Then that ramp continues to the right up to the front yard, giving us wheelchair access to the play space on the front yard. And then mechanical equipment, which we'll see in a little more detail on the kitchen wing on the left-hand side. A rendering of this facade showing the ramp, which we'll look at in a little more detail in a moment, and the windows. Here are a few indications of the leader material and the signage, which we're proposing to be pin mounted so as to be able to attach only to the brick joints and not damage the masonry. The path the ramped path up to the building and up to the front yard will be lit with step lighting, which you can see here on the left. And then there are some small uplights and downlights arrayed on the side of the building, which are here and on this cut, which will provide some additional lighting in the side yard and light up the building. On the opposite side of the building on 64th Street, we have already an existing opening at the street level, which we're modifying slightly to make it wheelchair accessible. And I should say that this elevation mistakenly shows the roof guard remaining. This is a remnant of an earlier concept, and that railing, which is shown here, is proposed to be removed. So here we have a rendering of that elevation showing, in fact, the guardrail gone. And I proposed treatment for the leaded glass windows, which you can see on the upper photograph in what was the former chapel. Here we have an elevation, a rendering of that building, this side of the building showing the modification to the entrance, which requires removing 2 steps, making the door a bit taller, but basically retaining the configuration of the building. And again, some lettering above the door and some lettering in the transom bar over the door announcing the name of the entrance. The back of the building, as we noted in the photograph, is pretty irregular and heavily scarred by additions which have been removed and fire escape which has been removed. And the school is proposing to regularize these openings to better serve the classroom function. And you can also see here on the right, which we'll look at a little more detail, is a new brick infill to create some mechanical space on every floor. And over here is this is the addition of the mechanical space on the kitchen elevation. So here's the back of the building as it existed not too long ago, and a rendering which is, of course, not visible from a public way. This is here really just for your information, to give you an idea of what the final configuration of the building will be. As Harry pointed out, you can see the mock-up in the photograph on the top for the proposed elevator bulkhead and the additional mechanical equipment on the kitchen extension, and then on the infill between the main building and the wings. So if we look a little bit at the details of the entrances, the drawing on the top shows you more or less the existing condition of the entry gate, which the school needs to enlarge a bit. So we're proposing to simply move the existing ornamental metal posts apart a bit and fabricate a new gate of very similar design, but just a little bit larger, a little more capacious, and add some plaques announcing the school to the public on the existing piers on either side of the gate. The stairs, which are currently in ruinous condition and I suspect not original to the building, are also very steep and close to the gate. So the school is proposing to extend these stairs and the flanking walls into the site to create a much more gracious and easily navigated entrance in and out of the school. I should also say that the school has hired a Mary Kay Judy, a building materials preservation specialist, to do a paint analysis of the existing remains of existing windows and of the window guards. And she has reported that the original color of the metalwork that she has examined is black. And so that's the color that we're proposing here for the fence and the gate. The stairs are proposed to be concrete. I should back up a little bit because to be continuous with the existing concrete walk in the front yard. You can see on the lower left, the existing condition, and over on the lower right, the proposed condition. At the entrance to the building, which is a pretty ornate terracotta extravaganza, we found in the landmarks designation report this photograph on the left, which shows that the original doors, or at least the doors that were in existence some time ago, was a pair of doors, a double door, rather than the single door with side lights, which exists there now, which is shown on the drawing in the center. So we're proposing to remove that metal door and replace it with a pair of glazed aluminum doors with a security grille, again, to make the entrance a bit more capacious. The other thing that we'll show you in a little bit more detail in a moment is that at the moment when you open the door, you step right out onto the steps, which is a little bit dangerous for the children. So we're proposing to raise these cheek walls, the existing bluestone cheek walls on either side, and extend this top step to make a landing outside the entry door. The other changes are removing the crosses from these round obscure glass elements and replacing them with similar obscure glass in the fan light, adding some signage over the door, and again, covering some Christian iconography in the panel above the vestibule with an FRP panel attached through the joints in the terracotta. You'll also see some small glass lights flanking the entrance, and some simple handrails to help the students get up and down the stairs. In rendered format, you can see them here. The rendering has simplified the terracotta a little bit, but there are no changes proposed to the terracotta. And I should say that the railings that were shown in the drawing on the previous slide are more accurately reflect our intentions. But you can see the larger landing that we're proposing outside the entry door, and the new aluminum double door. In these secondary entrances between the wing and the main building, almost none of this work is visible, except when you're right at the very front of the building. It's certainly not visible from a public way, but in general, what we're proposing is some excavation to make the journey from grade, which is over on the right, down to the basement level on the left a little bit easier, and modifying some windows and cutting some new door openings to get in and out of the public assembly space at the cellar level. There's also a small amount of additional construction. You can see here on the left, there was a bridge connecting the main building, which is behind us in this view, to the 64th Street wing. And we're proposing to extend this construction here, which is a relatively recent basement addition, extended under the bridge to make a bit more commodious entry into the basement. Similarly, on I'm sorry, these are the plans of this same entrance. On this view on the left is the existing plan, and the view on the right is the proposed plan. As I say, none of these changes are visible from the street. The major change to the appearance of the building exterior is an iron gate, which we'll see here on the left, which can't open completely because of the location of the leaders, which I think we cannot relocate, and makes the space relatively hostile in feeling. And we're proposing to remove this gate and store it and so that the entrance can be as open and welcoming as possible, which you can see in the rendering on the right. you're seeing a new door in the same location as an existing window. We're just cutting it down and adding a door and transom. It's the same basic approach on the other side. We're proposing to excavate and step down, and this is the same slide I just showed you. Did I go backwards? Yeah, it's on the other side. It's the same story. We have a gate which can't open because of the location of the leaders coming off the roof. You can see behind the gate on the left is a canvas vestibule, which we're proposing to remove, and then excavate down to the basement level to a door, giving us access to the public assembly space. On the 63rd Street side, we've seen this ramp already. The ramp comes up from 12th Avenue to the basement level and into the building, and then continues up to the front yard to give us wheelchair access to the play space in the front yard. And this requires taking this window opening and cutting it down to the ground and installing the new door with transom light, which you can see here. And some secondary retaining walls and iron fencing, which is all designed in the same spirit as the existing fencing around the building perimeter. Here you can see on the top the existing condition, and on the bottom the existing retaining wall cut down and the ramp installed on the sidewalk. In addition, you can see the uplights here, which were lighting the building.
Breaking up.
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Sorry, go ahead. It sounded to me like you were breaking up. I wanted to make sure everybody else could hear you.
Am I coming through clearly?
Okay. Oh, you are now, so please go ahead.
Okay, good. All right, so we have modest little uplights lighting the building. We have signage identifying the entrance and some school identifiers on the transom bar above the door, and lighting flanking the entrance. Here we have the existing condition, photograph on the left and a drawing on the right, which shows the existing metal security grille in the transom, which we're proposing to retain. You can see on the right the proposed unequal leaf door, and on the left the same the view with the existing gate still in place, although lowered by 2 steps in order to accommodate the wheelchair entrance on the side of the building. So here we are, existing conditions and a rendered view of the new entrance.
Except we're sure we are retaining the gate that's
Yes,
lowered,
we're not.
and it's
we're
not
we're
shown in the rendering.
Thank you, Harry. Yes, we're not showing the gate.
But you are retaining the gate.
Yes.
We are retaining that gate.
Yeah. Yeah. The nice thing about this gate is that it can open 180 degrees and be flat on the wall and be out of the way, unlike the other gates between the main building and the wings. The rear facade, the work of interest is here shown in purple. We have a small additional mechanical area that we're adding between the 63rd Street wing and the main building. We have the elevator, which is placed near the 63rd Street entrance, convenient to the youngest children, which are accommodated in this part of the building. This is play space for those youngest children. And then we have the relatively modern kitchen wing on which we're placing the bulk of the mechanical equipment. And as we've said before, this red line is the lot line. We have no right to do any work below that red dashed line.
Well, go back to that plan, John.
Sure, Harry.
While we're on this plan, the 64th Street former chapel wing, that space is open now and will still be open. It's going to be a multi-purpose space for the school involving indoor recreation. We'll be ending this presentation with talking about the stained glass windows, but that's where they are.
Thank you. So some not from the public way views of the mechanical equipment on the kitchen wing. And the proposed mechanical infill between the main building and the 63rd Street wing, which is held back to allow the buildings to retain their integrity. Section through the elevator shaft, which as you can see serves every floor of the building. We're proposing to clad this in a gray zinc, which will be at least recall the color of the existing dormers and the fiberglass cornice. And here we have some views of mock-ups of the mechanical equipment and the elevator bulkhead as seen from 64th Street. And you can see the beginning of the new residential development, which largely obscures the view of the back of the building from 64th Street. From 12th Avenue and from 63rd Street, yes, sorry, and looking at the 63rd Street corner, elevator bulkhead is visible above a corner of the building and obscured by this tree, which we can't see the mock-up, and of course is invisible from the 64th Street side at the lower side of the screen. Down the hill from 64th Street at the bottom of the screen, elevator bulkhead, mock-up of the elevator bulkhead, and closer to the building, again, we have a mock-up here and the proposed elevator bulkhead clad in zinc, similar to the other gray materials up there at that level. Windows, we'll touch briefly on the windows. So this 1940 tax photo shows the windows at least in their more or less original condition. We have double hungs up in the dormers. We have round head windows on the top floor. We have on the intermediate floors, we have square head windows with transom lights, and then we have steel leaded glass windows in the former chapel. At the basement level, you can see here's a window where the original brick molding has survived, which we're planning to leave in place. In the center is a reconstruction of the original window configuration, and we've found an aluminum window which mimics the shape of the brick mold and pretty much retains the existing sight line. So the proposed replacement is elevated on the left and the reconstructed original on the left at the cellar level. And then the round head windows are similar, as are the square head windows with transom bars. And then we have a more special condition, which are the leaded glass windows in the former chapel, which Harry has volunteered to speak about.
Yeah, so there are a group of 15 windows, some of them fan lights over the over windows, but most of them full height windows. The designation report mentions their existence, but gives no information about their provenance or their significance. So we brought in an expert I've worked with on various occasions, Martin Rambush, who came and spent a full afternoon on the site looking closely at the windows. He came to the conclusion, or we came to the conclusion together, but led by him, that he didn't recognize any signatures of a studio that he knew that had built them. They were not of the finest quality of construction. They are in reasonable shape, but pretty deteriorated, often cracked. And he just, the question was, are these significant? The answer in his estimation was a resounding no. Are they nice? Yes. Or can they find a new home? Quite possibly. So we got a proposal from Rambush to remove the windows intact and store them and use their connections to find a new home. that we haven't, the client is committed to this approach. We hope they can be reused and find a new home, but of all the Christian iconography on the building, the stained glass windows are in many ways the most vexing, because they're very very explicit, and even the typology is something that is reminiscent of something that's not in their mission. So we go to the next slide. You can see this and the next slide as well show each of the windows. In many cases, the Christian iconography is pictorial and explicit of certain scenes. Others it just crosses. All the windows have a border that is not filled with Christian iconography. But so we asked ourselves the question repeatedly: should we be retaining a border? Should we be retaining a vestige of these windows and otherwise dismantling them? But it seemed to us best to extend ourselves to find a new home for them, and not to break them up, and to instead design a window that shows that these windows were different from the rest of the building. They were a little bit more elaborate, and that's what we're showing in our proposal, as John explained. But we expect the cost of removing the windows and storing them was reasonably modest. The owner is committed to that, as I said. We haven't let out a contract because we want to present this approach to you, and we would also we assume we will contact the Archdiocese of Brooklyn and work through their resources to see if they have possible ways of finding a home or storing them, if that's their preference. There are other companies nationwide that store stained glass windows. So again, we think the significance of these windows, such as it is best honored by removing them and replacing them in their entirety, which of course, as a side note, achieves a much better thermal performance. So that's the last slide. Am I right, John? Oh, and this is the window that our intention is to replace it with. Again, it's picking up certain cues from the existing windows, but it's more just representative of the fact that these were not ordinary windows, but were something special.
All right, thank you.
And so that's a lot to chew on. Thank you for staying with us.
Thank you. I know there are many components to this, as there's typical when we are looking at an adaptive reuse project, and different uses have different code requirements and different needs. And so thank you for going through each of the components in such detail. And I know we have some questions, and so we'll turn to questions now. Commissioner Goldblum.
Okay. Oops, sorry. All right, a few questions for you. So the existing very bright green cornice is fiberglass, is that right?
No.
What's
John,
not?
John, you take that. The one we're looking at here on the chapel wing is original.
This is copper.
It's
This is copper. The fiberglass cornice is on the main building up at the top.
Uh-huh. All right, and the leaders are copper?
The leaders are mostly aluminum at the moment.
Right, but they were originally copper?
For sure,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The elevator bulkhead, if you were to give it a pitched roof, would it allow for the top to go down a little bit? Or a ridged roof, something that would, allow for a slight reduction?
I think that would only make it taller.
Only taller, so you couldn't bend it around the ridge beam, whatever.
Yeah, okay. We have to have a certain amount of height so that someone won't be crushed by the cab when it comes up.
Okay.
Yeah, we have that was elevator 101. We made sure that there was the minimum overrun possible from the top floor being serviced.
The paving at the front, it looks like it's pretty much edge to edge, with the exception of the planting along the entry. Is there a particular program that's driving the extent of the paving?
It's less paving. It's a permeable play surface.
Right, but it's rubber.
Yes, and it's
Okay.
it's the only outdoor space available to the school.
Right.
So now I've gone too far. So we have to give the kids some place to run around, and that's the only space that they
Granted,
have.
I just was wondering if
we
there
are-
was a
we're leaving-
specific, quantity that was, there was a kind of a program that was driving the extent, because it looks like it pretty much goes end to end, with the exception of the hedge along the perimeter and the new edging along the extended steps.
Yes, there's the planted edge inside the fence around the perimeter and existing privet, which will remain.
Okay.
And a few trees, but there are the projected population of this school is could be as many as 600 students. So they need this amount of space, I think.
Okay. And grass doesn't work for them?
I think it would just turn into dirt and dust.
Yeah, I have to say that it's a north-facing courtyard. Not that the building is that tall, but the grass in the current courtyard, which has had light or no use for a long time, has not prospered. It's been substantially bare dirt for a good while.
Okay. The window color you're showing in the renderings is cream. Was that verified by your paint analysis?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. The signage over the eyebrow window at the over the arch at the entrance, it looks like, is that going to be just mounted onto those moldings, or are you putting a new flat frieze there to put the signage on?
The intention is for those that lettering to be pin mounted onto the existing vestibule.
And all the signage is similar pin mounted plexi?
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
plastic?
Yep.
Yeah, in the other locations, it's on brick,
Right.
able to be mounted in the mortar joints. The stone will have to be a little more careful mounted. There are joints in the stone, and we can do a substructure in the pin mounting to hold it proud of the existing molding.
Thank you.
Okay, and just a follow-up question to Commissioner Goldblum's question about the material in the front yard. So what does that sit on? Does it just sit on top of grass or dirt, or does the surface have to be treated in any kind of more permanent way before you put this?
It's placed on a gravel substrate that allows the water to get into the ground and not run off.
Okay. All right, we have some more questions. Commissioner Jefferson, followed by Commissioner Bland.
Question about the elevator. I know it was the location was designed for the ground floor, basically the lobby. Did you try to shift it around so it would fit the roof form? Could you have made some shift so that the way it intersects with the roof and is not so awkward?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise us you're asking that question. And there's certainly been a great deal of discussion about this, that it's a complicated puzzle how to fit their program, and the size of the rooms toward the 12th Avenue side are key to maintaining the size of the rooms that fit their student population. And I just suffice it to say that there are many forces pushing and pulling the location of this elevator, and it landed here, and with in our mind, very little give.
Okay. Second question, the recreation area, are you going to have play equipment? And if indeed you're going to have play equipment, could they be areas that then have vegetation around it? Or is it basically both areas have to be completely open?
I'm not sure that the school has settled on exactly how the play area will be furnished, but certainly if there's play equipment, students need to be able to run around the play equipment and not.
That's true.
Not get tangled in the trees. Yeah.
No, but you could have areas that are protected, rubberized, and then you could have planting. So you could break up this mass of rubber in some way.
Oh, it is worth noting that the surface of the ground is well above the sidewalk level and screened from the sidewalk by the hedge, and is not really visible from the street. So I'm not sure it will affect the appearance of the building from the street, and that we are retaining at least 4 of the trees that are in the yard, 2 beautiful magnolias and 2 other trees.
John, you want to go to the rendering from the street? Just to,
yeah, if I can remember
put
where it
meat on
is.
what you just said.
I guess I'm going the wrong direction, right? Yes.
No.
There
There
it
you go.
is.
But no, from a bird's eye, from a eye level view.
So that's going to
Because
be.
it's true. It's easy to imagine this massive rubberized thing is contrary to to the appearance, but that privet exists. It's very dense.
Okay.
Our commitment is to maintain it, and it stays dense all winter.
Yeah, I can see it. It works. It's almost invisible. Thanks.
Okay. Next, we'll go to Commissioner Bland, followed by Commissioner Chapin, and then Commissioner Devonshire.
My comment is more of a comment rather than a question. That massive rubberized lawn, I just want to make the comment that I'm sure you're aware that many of the city parks are now using something that is, you have to get pretty darn close to it to distinguish it from real grass. It's a fake grass and so-called astroturf. I don't know, whatever it is now, it's much improved. But I've seen it used at Cadman Plaza Park in adjacent to Brooklyn Heights, and it's used extraordinarily heavily by.
Yes, that has held up amazingly well.
Right. So I just want to comment that would be a much more appropriate material than some of these rubberized, so-called rubberized surfaces. So I hope you're focusing on that rather than these other materials that look like a hard surface, but are in fact soft.
I think we're open to that.
Good, thanks.
Okay, thanks. All right, Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I appreciate Commissioner Bland's remark, because yes, that could be a substitute. Obviously, they have an area that is intended for a child's playground where they would need to use the rubberized surface, but perhaps on some of the other areas, that grass, if you fall on it, it can cause a skin knee, but it would probably be fairly good for your general active play issues. I wanted to ask, in addition, about the front entrance. The slide 28 shows what's going on there. And it looks like, I see the removal of religious iconography. It looks like some of the other detailing does not really have any religious significance. And I was wondering if some of that might be retained or duplicated if it really didn't have any religious connotation.
I tried to make the point that the rendering is not a perfect replication of the existing terracotta, but the only changes that are being proposed to the terracottas around here are to cover the plaque over the vestibule, and to as you can see, add some signage, and to remove the crosses from the the round obscure glass elements, and of course the doors. But the terracotta will be unchanged otherwise.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I missed that in the presentation. Or perhaps it didn't understand.
Yeah, it's confusing because you look at, there are some things like clusters of grapes or whatever they are below the modillions that are not shown in our rendering, but it's just manpower.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you. That's very helpful. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right, Commissioner Devonshire.
What's the material of the extant landing at the front entrance, and what's the material of the proposed?
Bluestone for both.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right. Yes, one more question, Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I forgot. I also wanted to ask about the one window. Looks like it's the actually depiction of an angel guardian of children. And when you were speaking about yeshiva, doing some, maybe discussion of the building at some point with the students. I was wondering if that particular window might be used, not necessarily in its current location, but for teaching purposes, if that's what it is. Maybe it's, just an angel with kids, but I noticed that particular one, which is a little less problematic, perhaps, since angels do appear in various capacities as messengers and other things in obviously Jewish religion as well.
Yeah, actually, I don't have my notes with me. Martin identified every scene in these windows, but specifically what saint and what part of the Bible, what story from the Bible it was depicting.
Yeah, I
and
understand.
it wasn't an angel guardian with children. It was a specific saint with specific in a tableau that was known.
Thank you. Thank you for the, that's what I wondered about, whether it was meant to be something representing the name originally and in some fashion, or it was, in fact, as you're suggesting, another situation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? All right, why don't we move to public testimony? We may have more questions after that. And we will start with anyone who signed up in advance and get to anyone else who wishes to speak. So if you're in the meeting and would like to speak, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. Please do that even if you did sign up in advance so we can find you easily. And I will turn it over to our Director of Intergovernmental and Community Affairs, Sonia Gior, to take us through the testimony.
Thank you. So we do have several signups in advance. Our first speaker will be Christina Conroy from the Victorian Society. And Christina, I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you could please unmute your mic and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society. Now, because of its massive scale and projecting wings, handsomely detailed masonry, and the well thought out use of arch-headed and square-headed window openings, the overall character of the Angel Guardian House isn't determined solely by its details. However, that doesn't mean that the proposed changes to the details shouldn't be carefully reviewed before any action is taken. Now, the VSNY is pleased to see that the transom windows in the square-headed sash were being reconstructed or recreated. However, the window drawings don't include a section showing the dimensions of the transom bars. They appear to be about 7 inches tall. If a standard meeting rail is 2 inches tall, please see the rendering L27 for a comparison. The dimensions don't appear close to matching those of the historic windows. The applicants are proposing to install new round-headed windows without transoms on the 3rd floor for the 3 street-facing facades. On the drawing L20, they show transoms for the round-headed windows on the rear facade. Now, there is no historic precedent showing transoms at the rear, so they should be eliminated. The roof railing being proposed for the mechanical equipment area at the rear and at the top of the main block above the attic floor appear very heavy and obtrusive. The applicant should use stainless steel cable railings at these areas. The applicants are proposing a large and possibly excessive number of light fixtures, speakers, cameras to be attached to the facade. There are no installation details. The modern light fixtures on posts shown on the rendering on L24 and L25 have no relation to the design or the style of the building. They should be replaced with some more sympathetic features. The applicants are proposing to use security cameras with surface spray treatment Hikvision white, shown on board L19. Well, what is that finish? Why is that appropriate for this building? Finally, most importantly, there is no information about what is to be done with the stained glass windows, which are to be removed from the chapel. But these are noted in the designation report, and they must not be discarded. Commissioners, in the late 1990s, the Packer Institute received a CNA for work at the Old St. Anne's Church, which included the removal of similar windows. Those applicants were required to find a suitable buyer for them. These applicants should be required to do so also. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Michelle Arbalou from the Historic Districts Council. And Michelle, I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you could please unmute your mic and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, Michelle Arbalou for the Historic Districts Council. HDC is generally comfortable with this proposal with the following qualifications. 1, signage stretching along the entrance arch is not appropriate and would compromise the architectural integrity and detailing of that portal. 2, the side entrance door should be black, not white. 3, some sort of articulation of the building's base at the location of the new elevator tower should be explored along the rear facade, perhaps providing recessed brick panels in the old masonry openings as a way to preserve the shape of the blind windows would help the composition and eliminate the need for control joints. And 4, the proposed window mutton configuration on the openings where religious stained glass has been removed seems a bit clunky. We wonder if the applicant can study this further and find a more elegant configuration. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Claudia Shiripa. And Claudia, I'll be promoting you to panelist now. If you could please accept that request. Thank you. And if you could please unmute your mic and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize that the meeting was happening today, and it's a little bit short notice, but I just want to there's a lot of comments that I kind of want to make. Basically, this property has been chipped away, and I keep reiterating that somebody needs to come and look at what's going on. This property was landmarked for a reason, and when you look at this property, it doesn't even look like the landmark. The windows are changed. Everything is broken. It's really it's in total disarray. Total disarray. I'm sorry that I don't have the pictures to upload so I can actually show you what we had and what's going on now. And I really do believe that somebody needs to come down here immediately to look at what is going on with this building. It is terrible. So this landmarked the building that we fought so hard for is being chipped away. As far as, I understand that this is becoming a yeshiva, but there's a community that surrounds this building, and that's why we had landmarked it. So there has to be a respect of what the building should be landmarked, what it entails, and you should be keeping what it has on it. I know they want to take out all the religious icons. I know that they want to widen the windows, but when you go around and you look at this building now, it doesn't even look like the same building. And I am asking for them to bring it back to landmarking status, that they need to landmark it the way it looked before all this happened. And somebody really needs to come down and review it. And that's really I was just making the comments because I apologize. I didn't know that this meeting was happening today and everything was done.
Claudia, I think you're muted now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I apologize. So I just wish that I had some more time so I can upload the photos of the before and what's going on. It's really terrible. I'm just going to straight out. It's terrible. It's being chipped away and nobody is taking the time to come down. I had asked a few people to come down before this all is happening, and nobody's coming down to look at the building. And somebody really needs to. Sometimes there's certain instances where you have to, come and see it for yourself. So all the copper is hanging off. It's terrible. It's terrible. And as far as like these loud horns and all this thing that they're proposing, there's a community that's around this building for 100 years. Okay, there has to be respect. And I don't see. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Kelly Carroll. Kelly, I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you could please unmute your mic and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Kelly Carroll, and I'm a Brooklyn Community Board 10 resident, and I teach in the Historic Preservation Studies program at NYU's SPS and the Center for Publishing and Applied Liberal Arts. Today's hearing marks a crucial step towards this building once again being used, as it has sat empty and increasingly forlorn in the years after it was sold. It is a positive step for this building of this size to be adaptively reused, but the physical changes necessary to facilitate its new life must be weighed carefully by the Commission, as it is an individual landmark and the only one in Dyker Heights. Overall, the intention and needs of the transition are positive. However, there seems to be an excess of signage and lighting. There are pin-mounted signs proposed for the 12th Avenue, 63rd Street, and 64th Street facades, as well as signage on the stone piers that flank the entrance gate and the gate itself. The individual characters that comprise each of the signs equates to punctures in the masonry, which may be better resolved by utilizing lawn signs, a treatment found on other schools in the vicinity of the Angel Guardian home, including right across the street at PS 187. I ask that the Commission also look closely at the number of desired light fixtures, which are proposed along the string courses on each public-facing facade and in the front yard as tall as 10 and 15 foot posts. Please consider the sum of all these parts. In terms of historic preservation, is it possible for LPC staff to work with the applicant to determine a compromise to salvage portions of the stained glass? As an example, a successful solution was found by LPC a few years ago during the individually landmarked First Church of Christ Scientists conversion to a museum CMOM. In that case, decorative, non-iconographic elements of the windows were retained in situ. Stained glass is a character-defining feature both of Jewish and ecclesiastical architecture from this time period, so its retention would not detract or be at odds with the new building's new use. These windows are significant designed works of art and are designated features of the building. A thorough preservation plan is necessary. Finally, the Angel Guardian home was once one element of an expansive greenscaped complex which would comprised an entire city block, which has been totally eradicated due to development. The only vestige of that verdant nature remaining is the front yard of the landmark site, which is proposed to be hardscaped over. And I did hear that it was permeable, but it's still hardscape when it's not grass. Is it possible programmatically for this space to be relocated? And if not, reduced to preserve a sense of this building's historic formal landscape siting? Thank you.
Thank you. So we do not have any additional speakers signed up, and I'm not seeing, well, actually we do have one speaker, Francis Villa Marone, but I'm not seeing Francis in the call. So I'll just note for the record that Brooklyn Community Board 10 recommends approval, but notes the following concerns. Exterior signage should not be pinned or permanently attached to the facade of the building. The height of the railing on the roof will be required by code, but the continuous horizontal component of the railing should be lowered to reduce its visual impact. The current landscaping should be preserved and the shrubbery border should be widened. And the stained glass windows should not be replaced with appropriate iconography. Or should be replaced with appropriate iconography. If this is not feasible, then the window should be removed and deposited with the Catholic diocese and not be disposed of. And I'll turn it back to you, Chair Carroll.
All right, thank you very much. So we've heard testimony on the number and type of sort of utilitarian fixtures such as signage and lighting and cameras. We've heard testimony on the proposed configuration of some of the new windows, including in the chapel as well as on the main building. and some thoughts about the stained glass in general, and as well as some other, I think, other comments specific to some details like the door color. So would you like to respond to any of these comments?
Sure. One easy comment, the easiest, is that when we showed the community board was retaining a railing on the top of the roof. And, you know, they played a role in us going back to the drawing board and saying, can we get that last piece of mechanical equipment off the roof and remove the railing? So we agree, we accept that comment. I'll let John talk about the accuracy of the window replacement. Our intention is to do what was there originally. And if we're showing any transom dimensions that's seemingly incorrect, we're happy to work with staff to resolve that. We appreciate the community members' concern for the building. If you were not aware that all this had been going on between the yeshiva and their architects, between the architects at yeshiva and landmarks, you would think nothing is happening. Couldn't be further from the truth. This building is treasured and going to be cared for. And there are several comments about the excessive speakers and the lighting. We just have to confess that it's been a complex process between the yeshiva's consultants. There are many people with opinions and advocating for security and safety within the yeshiva. It's a work in progress. What we've shown may look excessive. I think if only you could see the earlier drawings. But we are very happy to continue working with staff to make sure that the lighting and the speakers and the signage as well does not threaten the building's integrity. We think what we're proposing is reasonable, but it's certainly worth an examination. John, you want to say anything more about the windows?
Only that we've taken our cue on the windows from the what we can find in the way of historical photographs, which of course are all very low resolution. Our best source is the 1940 tax photograph, and we've done our best to reproduce the proportions of the windows as shown there, which in some cases I believe are not original to the building, but in any case, that's our best source, and we're happy to speak to staff about polishing up the window details as need be.
And the comments about the stained glass windows were perfectly in line with what we're committing to do.
Right, the committed
not the CMOM approach, but the PAC approach.
Find right a home for the stained glass windows and not discarding them. Okay, all right, commissioners, do we have any final questions? All right, it looks like we don't. So I'm going to start to send you all requests to unmute so that we can move to close the hearing and begin our discussion. So Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the hearing is closed and we'll now begin our discussion. And, you know, as we know, adaptive reuse can be a very important tool in preservation, and it's one of our significant tools in our preservation toolbox. And you know, I am very happy that there is an application here before us that does allow for a new user to come in and embrace and restore so many components of this building. So I am confident that with this moving forward, this building will be very cared for and maintained and restored. So I'm happy to see this proposal before us. There are a number of components, and this is typical with an adaptive reuse project. So there are changes including windows, changes for barrier-free access, changes at the roof line for an elevator, changes at the front yard for playground area, and additions, the utilitarian additions at the back where there once were other utilitarian additions, and the removal and hopefully rehoming of stained glass windows to and their replacement with a window of a different configuration. So we'll begin this discussion. Commissioner Goldblum, would you like to start this one?
Sure. I mean, this is a very complex and intricate application. A few things. First of all, I think that the applicant's statement at the beginning was great and lovely, and I thank him for it. And I thank the client for taking this seriously and working with BKSK to do the right thing. I think that the seeing this reminds me of the hearing when we designated the building, and I really do feel that it's quite unfortunate that, you know, I guess this is what had to happen, and that's real estate in New York in the modern age. But the fact that we lost the campus while keeping the building is nice, but it's sad, and the building is sadder as an island than as part of a campus, which it sounds like the client could have used. However, that's an alternate reality. I think that in general, most of what's being done here is appropriate. I think that the modifications to the entries to allow for barrier-free access seem reasonable. I think that the replacement of the front doors with new front doors is appropriate. However, I would suggest that they integrate a lower panel as opposed to a full height glass, which seems to be consistent with the original doors. I think that the modifications to the windows generally is appropriate. I do, however, have a few comments about other aspects that I think are troubling. First of all, the landscaping in the front. And this is an individual landmark, so it's not all about what one can see from the street necessarily. And as everyone knows, we hold those to a little bit of a higher standard. So I would ask the applicant to work with the staff to limit the amount of rubberized permeable play surface to the absolute minimum that is necessary. I would certainly suggest that the staff explore with them the widening the borders on the street sides, creating a border along the pathway that cuts across the front of the building, and continuing a border along the entry pathway such that the paved areas were viewed as and could be seen as islands in a landscaped area. If grass doesn't work, then there's lots of other solutions that would for a north-facing facade. Can be done, and it's been done elsewhere. I'm sure that it can be done here as well. I think that the signage is much too excessive. I count 6 signs on the front facade, 2 entry plaques, one at the frieze over in the gate, one at the arch, the logo over the door, and then the signage on above the, on the wall. Not to mention the signs at every door on the side, etc. I think that the signs on the sides of the building are acceptable, but the amount that is on the front is way too much. I think that the signage that is on the building is not signage that would have been there or was there or that we can find any documentation for that we've seen. I think it changes the nature of the building in a way that subsumes the design to the signage, and I don't think that would be an appropriate intervention. I think that the plaque signs, the frieze sign at the gate are appropriate. I think that the arch sign is a little bit troubling. I think that the use of plexiglass is not an appropriate material for a historic building. I think that all metal work that was copper should be copper. Leaders, gutters, replacement cornice elements should be copper. They can be patinated to have the green color if that's desired or not, but they should be copper. I think that the elevator could be moved towards the center of the building, which would eliminate its, I don't think that its impact on the rear facade is as significant as its impact on the side facade that we see at the bottom right here and the top right. I think that looking at the plan, it might be possible to slide it across so that it was closer to the center and did not dominate this angle. And I think they might consider using copper instead of standing seam for the cladding, since it will be visible. Columbia does that on a lot of its buildings, and it looks perfectly good. And we have copper here. I think that the stained glass solution is unfortunate but acceptable to me, as long as a taker is identified. And I'll stop there.
Okay, great. All right, Commissioner Devonshire.
I have no disagreements with anything that my colleague has stated. Especially two things. The signage, I think, is egregiously overwrought and unnecessary. I also agree about his statement about copper. If it's copper now, it needs to be copper in the future. I'm a little conflicted with the material in the front yard. I mean, one of the things that Harry said is that because it faces north, it's sand and it's in horrible condition. I'm looking out my window at a north-facing yard that is lush and green. Part of the problem with grass is that it doesn't like to grow under trees. All of that said, I agree with Commissioner Goldblum's statements about borders and about reducing the size of the, as much as possible, the play space. But I also consider the use of the rubberized if totally necessary and no alternate is able to be found. It's ultimately reversible and can be pulled up, and perhaps a different user in the future can plant grass and have lawns. I hate lawns, by the way. But in any case, I also agree that regrettably, the iconographic stained glass needs to disappear, but I think it needs to disappear into appropriate cases, be stored properly, and a buyer found for it before any of this is allowed to happen.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I agree with the two Michaels. Most of their comments are absolutely correct. There was way too many signage. I want to emphasize on the preservation of the stained glass as much as possible. That they be, if they are to be removed, they should be retrofitted and then be retained on site whenever possible. I also agree with the comment from Goldblum about the front door, the bottom panel, and the grass versus the artificial turf is a tough one for me. And I think Commissioner Devonshire made a good point that even if it's in the shade in the northern side, I would defer to the rest of the commissioners to decide what is the appropriate course of action. And in terms of the lighting posts, if they can be reduced, that will be fantastic.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bland.
I just want to say I was very moved by the opening statement by the representative of the yeshiva past this prologue. And that's exactly what this is. And I think it's a poetical story here, how the community around it, the demographics have changed. The building will change ever so slightly only to accommodate that very extraordinary change in use from a Catholic to a Jewish building. I think it's kind of a wonderful and very hopeful sign for our city. That said, I also think that there is too much signage. It's been said, I don't need to say it too many times, but I am in that camp. I agree with most of the other issues that have been brought forth. The stained glass windows, I'm not sure we need to have them sold or whatever, given to another user to allow them to be removed. I think they should be removed, but they certainly should not be destroyed, and they should be warehoused, if not actually sold already or given to another user. And I just want to reiterate my experience with this fake grass. It's being used all over the city now. It is almost indistinguishable from grass. You have to get really close to see it, that it's not real grass. You only know it's real grass because it's so beautifully mowed, if you will, and taken care of. It's used on Cadman Plaza in near Brooklyn Heights. It's used on the piers. Pier 6, and it gets extraordinary use. So I would encourage that use. Grass will never be a substitute here. It will just not work. So anyway, those are my thoughts, but I think this is really overall a wonderful thing to see for this individual landmark, for its new use for, I think, a long period of time.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
I must commend the architects. They did a completely thorough job of analysis and thinking about this project. I'm impressed. The only two issues I have is really the grass issue, the front yard, and the elevator, and it has to be shifted some way to accommodate, keep them not to be not as pronounced as it is here in this image. And I think my fellow commissioners, the two commissioners before me, had a solution for it, and I think it should be followed.
Thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
I don't want to repeat what others have said. The elevator bulkhead is of great importance. I mean, you can see in that upper right-hand image that something's got to be, some alternative has to be considered for that. I agree with all the other comments. The only thing I would highlight is on the stained glass. While I greatly appreciate that, which there are certain images in certain glass that has to be removed and preserved, etc. I'm not entirely sure that there weren't a series of windows that have no iconography and at all, and that were stained glass. I thought I saw a slide of those. I would just ask that our staff take a look at those windows because stained glass is is not uncommon at all in synagogues. It is not a rarity in certain age buildings. In fact, it's very common. So I would ask that they take a hard look at whether there's a series of windows where stained glass can be retained because it has no iconography whatsoever. Otherwise, I don't have anything else to add to the comments made by my fellow commissioners. I would also say that I do appreciate the introduction that we received from Mr. Siegel. Often we hear introductions that don't really relate to the work that we're doing. I think he addressed it head on. I think he used the phrase of keeping this building as a beacon of kindness, which I think is an absolutely spectacular phrase. And I hope that they continue to do that, and that the community will actually accept the change and respect the change as much as the Mr. Siegel says they will be respecting the building.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baron.
Thanks. I agree with so many of the comments. Seems like it would be a wonderful project, and it's really heartening to see that the kind of the mission of one congregation can pass to another, and that we all share in those values. I think that I keep wondering if there's a way for, and I'm not sure about this, for the bulkhead to either be integrated with the smokestack, with the original steam smokestack, and or relate to it somehow, or if that's the wrong approach, meaning that we want, one would want for the new element to be distinguished from the historic one. I'm sort of on the fence about that, but I think that needs a little bit more thought. I don't know that I'm in general in agreement that there was just too much signage. I don't know that that's the case. However, but if I go through the pieces, I think that the signage at the front, the two large piers at the entry is acceptable with plaques that can be removed. I think that the signage at the gate is acceptable. I do not think that the signage at the above the doorway, the arched signage is acceptable. I don't think that that's appropriate. And I think that the signage on the building face is all right, but needs to be shortened. And so meaning they don't have to say the whole Talmud Torah Omre Emet and the Binyan Avram Levi Klein, one or the other, either the name of the building or the name of the congregation. It just seems like a very long text, especially those kind of quotation marks. So I find that to be just it's on some level it's kind of fitting that there would be this kind of narrative on the building, but it's not appropriate, I think, for it to be especially redundant with the signage that's on the gate. So that should be reduced. My concern about the outdoor scape is less about grass as Commissioner Devonshire noted, the possibility of removable play surfaces, and Commissioner Bland's point about the sort of the fake grass as being used widely. I'm more concerned about the trees, and I'm not entirely clear on which trees exist, which trees are being proposed for removal. And I think that the trees, if they are the kind of, especially the mature trees, should be retained, and whatever play situations happened around those should be, to the extent that they can be, modest. And as others have said, if further work can be done on the lighting and security systems so that they're kept to whatever minimal standards, but ones that the congregation, that the group and the occupants can use properly, that would be good for them to work with staff on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
Okay, I agree with the comments in general of most of the commissioners about the appropriateness of removing the religious iconography and preserving the windows. I think that with regard to the lawn, which has been the other main issue that's been discussed, I think that I agree with Commissioner Bland about using the fake grass, and also there'll be an area they want for a children's play area, which will need the rubber surfacing. I think that they should look at some additional, trees, which has been suggested by a couple of commissioners. I wouldn't make them preserve the existing ones because if kids are running around, let's say playing soccer or the equivalent or something, you don't want them running into a tree. So you've got to, just do it peripherally, I think, but some shade along with these areas is also desirable, I think. So that would be my suggestion. I'm going to just run very quickly through elements because I know we're asked usually to reference things we're approving. So the removal of the guardrails at the roof, the elevator with this changes, suggestions that have made about changing it. The ADA accessible ramp, I can approve. The back openings on the openings on the back and the brick infill that's needed there, I can approve. The main door, the changes to the signage there, I think, as everyone has said, overall we should look at some reduction in signage, and the signage on the building might definitely be somewhere to look. The women's and men's entrances, changes there, and the storage of the gates there. The door surround changes, which I think are general appropriate for the removal of the iconography, and we were reassured that they're remaining the other keeping the other details and restoring them as necessary. The added mechanical area in the rear I can approve, and I think that's pretty much everything. The one thing I just say about the stained glass is, as was said in testimony, we have looked at instances where part of the windows were retained and other pieces taken away. I think in this case, that's probably not the best approach, but what they have suggested, taking the windows out intact. And I went through the windows. I didn't see anything that did not have some religious iconography included in what was presented to us. So thank you.
Okay.
I think I want to just say also, it's very sensitive. I think it's a very sensitive reuse the way it's been proposed, and a really good job was done by the owner working with the architects.
Great. Thank you. And thank you all for your thoughtful comments. And again, I do think that this is a very sensitive and modest approach, considering the amount of fiddling that has to happen to make it work. And I think it's great for this individual landmark. Many projects we see involve much larger interventions to accommodate a new use. And I think this has been kept to a minimum. But I think we still had some comments and concerns that I think the applicants should go back and think about and come back and address for us. And those include mostly kind of reversible things. So I think areas that should be easy enough for you to restudy and not affect the long-term goals of this project. So restudying some of the signs, restudying the lighting and security fixtures to ensure that they're the minimum, restudying the outdoor landscaping in terms of the type and or amount of surface material and trees and that relationship, and shifting the elevator to address the visibility, thinking about materials on all of the elements, in particular where there was copper, there should be copper, and including a solid panel in the base of the doors. I think many of the other changes have been supported by the commission, including modifications to the configuration of the doors, the gates, the removal of the two sort of gates tucked into between the wings of the main building, and the barrier-free access ramp on 63rd, and the creation of the new door there. So I think there was a lot to go through today, so I want to thank everybody for presenting it well, commenting on it, and getting us to this decision, to this place in our process today, which I think is a very supportive one, but there are a few refinements to some of these sort of external components that I think can be easily addressed and brought back to us quickly. So we'll take no action, and we will see you back as soon as you're ready to just revisit with us the issues like the signage, the cameras, the lighting, and the elevator, and the the landscaping in the front. And I think everybody's comfortable with that being the play area. It's just thinking about what the right relationship and materials are there. So thank you again, and we'll take no action. And we will break for lunch. We are quite behind schedule. So we will come back in exactly 30 minutes at 1:50, and we will resume with item number 4, I believe. So we'll ask all members of the public to voluntarily leave the meeting so that you can easily rejoin the